Hey guys, Robert here. The merch store is finally live. Check it out at DarkHorrorNarrations.com. As always, thank you everyone for the love and support on the channel through the hard times. As YouTube refuses to remonetize me, this is by far the most direct platform, independent way to support my work and help allow for continued production of stories on this channel. Thank you all. Now to the real reason we are all here. Settle in, turn the lights down low, and let the horror begin. The drive out to Manchac on that Sunday took longer than it should have. I knew the road. I had taken it 3 times in the last month, and a few hundred times across the years before that, going out to fish or going out to drink with my brother when we were both young enough that drinking in the swamp seemed like a thing a person did. I could have driven it with my eyes shut, but I went slow that morning. 45 in a 60. Both hands on the wheel and the radio off. Trucks behind me passed when they could, pickup drivers staring as they went around me, and I did not look at them. I looked at the road in front of me, and I tried not to think about what was going to be at the end of it. The sky was the color of an unwashed pan. Not raining yet, but considering. The wind was already up in the cypress along the edge of the highway, and the Spanish moss was moving the way it moves before a storm, slow and dead. Renee had called me at 8:12. I knew the exact time because I had been making pancakes for Ellie when the phone went off on the counter and I had glanced at the clock on the stove. She was trying not to cry on the line. Cole had told her the night before he was going up to a friend's camp in Slidell. He had not made it there. He had not come home, had not answered his phone all night. She had called the police, and they had told her what they tell everyone before 24 hours have passed, which is that they cannot do anything yet, which is that adult men sometimes go quiet for a night and come back the next morning embarrassed. She did not believe them. I did not believe them either. I told her I would start driving. I would look on the route up to Slidell and the route back and the routes Cole liked to take when he wanted to be alone. I would call her as soon as I knew anything. I did not tell her I knew exactly where my brother was. I did not tell her that I had been the one who put him there. Mara had come out of the bedroom in her bathrobe while I was hanging up. She had asked me what was wrong. I had told her some of the truth and none of the rest of it. I had kissed Ellie on the head, walked out to the car, backed out of the driveway slow and quiet because some part of me was still trying not to be the man making this drive. The turnoff to the fishing camp came up on my left. There was no sign. There had never been a sign. I had been there enough times in the last month to know the bend in the road that meant the gravel was coming, the lean of the cypress on the right. The rusted-out trailer on the left was already half swallowed by kudzu. I slowed and turned in. The gravel popped under the tires. The car eased forward into the trees. Cole's truck was already there. The driver's door was open. The keys were still in the ignition. I could hear the bell dinging through the morning air across the gravel between us. Slow and even, the way a clock ticks. I sat in the car for a long time before I turned the engine off. A month earlier, on a Tuesday evening, in the first week of September, I had been sitting on my front porch in mid-city, with a Modelo in my hand, and my daughter Ellie, on her bike, on the sidewalk in front of me. That was when I first saw the man under the live oak across the street. We had had a wet summer that year, and the heat that week had been a different kind of heat, the kind where the air feels like cellophane on your skin even after sundown. I remember the day for the heat and for the lime in my beer going soft on the rim of the bottle from the temperature, and I remember it because I have remembered it every night since. I was 38 that fall. I had been at my job 8 years. I built apps for phones, which sounds like more than it is. Most of what I did was bug tickets and stand-ups and arguing with a product manager named Gavin about whether a button needed to be blue or teal. The work was steady, and it paid for a shotgun double on a quiet block in mid-city, and a daughter in private school, and a wife who could afford to teach high school English because she wanted to instead of because she had to. We had 2 old cars in the driveway and a Toyota Highlander that was Mara's. The fence the previous owner had painted 3 years before we moved in was peeling on the alley side, and we kept saying we would repaint it, and we never did. Ellie was 8 then. She was big enough to ride her bike without me watching every second, and small enough that I still watched anyway. She had been on her bike all summer. The block we lived on was one of those blocks where the cars parked along the curb made a kind of slalom for kids on bikes, and the neighbors had stopped being upset about it after the first year of us living there. The block was quiet in the way New Orleans blocks can be when they want to be. Oak trees on both sides, the roots pushing up the sidewalk in places, the street light at the corner orange and slow to come on at night. The man was standing under the live oak directly across the street from our porch. I noticed him because I was watching Ellie loop back around at the far end of the sidewalk, and my eyes drifted past the oak, and there he was, a man in his 50s, lean, dressed in dark slacks and a dark coat. The coat was the wrong coat for September in Louisiana. The coat was the wrong coat for any month in Louisiana, except maybe 2 weeks in January. It was a heavy coat with lapels, dark gray or black, the kind of coat a man wears to a funeral in a colder place. He was standing with his hands at his sides. He was not on his phone. He was not waiting for a ride. He was just standing there, facing my house, his eyes more or less on my porch. I lifted my hand at him. I am a Louisianan, even if I work in an office downtown and write code for a living, and a man waves at his neighbors. He did not wave back. He did not move. He kept his hands at his sides. I told myself maybe he had not seen me. The porch was deeper in shadow than the sidewalk. The light was almost gone. I picked up my Modelo and took another swallow and watched him for another 10 or 15 seconds, and he did not move. Mara called my name from the kitchen. She said the jambalaya was ready and to come on inside and to call Ellie. I called Ellie. Ellie came pedaling down the sidewalk in that hard, fast way kids ride when their mother has called them to dinner and they don't want to be late, but they also don't want to seem like they are hurrying. She skidded to a stop in front of the porch and dropped the bike on the lawn and ran up the steps past me. "There's a man across the street, Sweet Pea," I said. She stopped in the doorway and looked back. "Where?" I pointed. She squinted across the street at the live oak. She looked at me. "Where?" she said again. I looked. The man was gone. Ellie shrugged the way an 8-year-old shrugs when an adult is being weird, and she went inside. I sat on the porch with my Modelo for another minute looking at the live oak and the empty sidewalk under it. There was nothing across the street that had not been across the street 10 minutes earlier. The Howard house, the bend of the oak, the streetlight just now coming on, slow and orange. I got up. I went inside. I had the jambalaya. I helped Ellie with her math homework. I watched a couple of innings of Saints preseason football with the sound low while Mara graded papers at the kitchen table. I went to bed. I did not sleep well. The next day was a normal Wednesday. I had not thought about the man on the way to work because I had not thought about him at all. The morning had been the morning. The coffee. The drive downtown. The stand-up at 9 where Gavin had wanted to talk for 40 minutes about a button. Lunch at Domeliza's because I had been craving a hot sausage po' boy and because going to Domeliza's at lunch is the kind of small permission I gave myself on days when the work was tedious. The drive home through the heat. The shower. The change into shorts and a faded LSU shirt. The Modelo from the fridge. The porch. The man was across the street. I saw him the second I sat down. He was standing where he had been standing the night before, under the live oak, in the same coat, facing my house. The streetlight was not on yet. The sun was almost gone. There was that quality of light New Orleans has in September, where everything looks like it is happening underwater, soft and a little green. I sat with my Modelo and watched him. He did not move. He did not look like he was watching me look at him. He was just there. The way a mailbox is there. The way a sign is there. He had the stillness of an object, not a person. After a minute I picked up my phone off the porch railing and I checked the time, because I wanted to know how long he had been there and how long I was going to sit there watching him. The time on my phone said 7:47. I do not know why I wrote it down. I am not a man who writes things down. I have a notes app on my phone that I use for grocery lists, and that's about it. But I opened the notes app and I made a new note and I typed the time and the date and I put it back in my pocket. Some part of me had decided the time mattered before the rest of me had figured out why. Mara called me in. I called Ellie. Ellie came pedaling. I stood up off the porch and I crossed the street. I was 12 feet away from him when he was gone. I do not mean he turned and walked away. I do not mean I blinked and missed him. I mean that I was looking at the back of his coat one second and looking at the trunk of the live oak the next, and the space he had been in was empty, and the sidewalk was empty, and the street was empty in both directions because it was a Wednesday at 7:47 and the block was quiet. There was nowhere for a man to go in less than half a second. There was no door. There was no car. There was no shadow deep enough to step into. I stood under the live oak with my hands in my pockets, and I looked up into the branches, the way you would look up into the branches if you thought maybe the man had climbed a tree, which I knew he had not done, but I needed to look somewhere. The branches were full of Spanish moss and air. Nothing moved up there but the moss and the slow heat. I went back across the street. I went inside. I ate jambalaya for the second night in a row because Mara had made enough on Tuesday to last us 3 days. I did not tell her what I had seen. I did not know what I had seen. I helped Ellie with her math homework again. She was learning long division. She got frustrated and threw her pencil, and I picked the pencil up and gave it back to her and told her about a time I had thrown a pencil at her age and her grandmother had made me write an apology to the pencil. She laughed. She did her long division. Mara graded papers at the kitchen table. The radio in the kitchen was tuned to WWOZ, which Mara liked to have on in the background while she graded because she said the music made the bad essays bearable. They were playing some old Professor Longhair, and the piano was thumping low and steady through the kitchen and across the living room to where I was sitting on the couch trying to read a book about distributed systems that I was not really reading. I was thinking about the man across the street. I was thinking about how he had been gone in the space of a heartbeat. I was thinking about how my notes app said 7:47 on Tuesday and 7:47 on Wednesday, and how that was either nothing or something, and how either way I was going to be on the porch tomorrow night at 7:47 to find out. I went to bed early. I did not sleep well. I did not sleep well for the rest of that week. The phone call from my brother came on a Thursday. I was on the porch. Of course I was on the porch. It was 7:43 by the clock on my phone, and the man was already across the street. He had been there since 7:38, which I knew because I had checked twice in the last 10 minutes. The streetlight had not come on yet. Ellie was inside helping Mara with the dishes because Mara had taken the Highlander up to her sister's house in Metairie that morning to drop off some baby clothes for Mara's niece and had gotten home too late to start dinner, so I had ordered pizza from Reginelli's, and Ellie had been allowed to drink an actual Coke with her pizza, which she considered a major event. The man was facing my house. The man had been facing my house for 13 minutes. I had been on my third Modelo, because something about the man across the street made me drink faster than I normally drank, and I had been wishing I had brought out a fourth before I left the kitchen. My phone went off in my hand, and I jumped hard enough that beer sloshed over my knuckles. The screen said, Cole. I had not spoken to my brother since Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoons were the day we usually called each other, because Sundays were the only day neither of us was working. And over the years, it had become the day my brother and I checked in on each other the way other families check in on Christmas. Sometimes the calls were 2 minutes. Sometimes they were 40. This call was on a Thursday at 7:43 in the evening, and that was wrong. I answered. Adam, he said. Hey, brother, you good? There was a long second on the line. I could hear his breathing on the other end. Cole has always been a heavy breather when he is upset, even when he is trying not to be, because the cancer had taken something out of his lungs back when he was 32, and his breathing had never come all the way back. You could hear it on the phone if you knew what you were listening for. I knew what I was listening for. You at the house? He said. On the porch. You looking at the street right now? I looked at the street. I looked at the live oak. The man was still there. I did not say anything for a second. Cole did not say anything either. The sound of his breathing was loud in the speaker. "Adam," he said, "is there a man standing across the street from your house right now?" I had to put the beer down on the porch railing so I would not drop it. My hand was shaking. Cole had a daughter the same age as Lacey at our wedding, which is to say my niece Lacey was 14 and had been at our wedding when she was newborn, and small enough to hold in one hand. Cole had been my best man. Cole had taught me how to drive a stick shift. Cole had broken his nose on my behalf in the parking lot of a Circle K when we were 19 and 17, and I was the one who had been mouthing off, and he was the one who had taken the punch for it. Cole did not call to ask weird questions. Cole called to talk about the Saints and to ask whether Mama had been to the cardiologist and to bitch about his job. "Yes," I said. "Coat?" "Yes." There was another long second on the line. "Mine has been outside my house every night this week," he said. I did not know what to say. I sat down on the porch step. The man across the street had not moved. The man across the street did not look like he was listening to me. The man across the street was just standing there, the way he had been standing for the last 3 nights, the way he was probably going to be standing tomorrow night and the night after that. "He there right now?" I said. "Yeah." "What time?" 7:43. "Mine too." Cole let out a breath that was almost a laugh and was not a laugh. "What the fuck, Adam?" he said. "I don't know. I called Renee out here yesterday. I said, look. I said, do you see that man? She said, what man? She looked right at him. She walked out onto the porch with me. She said, baby, there's nobody across the street. Mara hasn't seen him either, I said, although I had not actually asked Mara, and I knew suddenly and for sure that Mara would not see him if I did ask her, and I was not going to ask her. What is this? He said. I don't know, I said. We sat on the line. Neither of us hung up. Neither of us said anything. I could hear his breathing, and I could hear my own, and I could hear a dog 2 streets over barking at something, the way dogs sometimes bark at nothing. You remember Manchac, I said. It came out of my mouth before I had decided to say it. There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a longer silence than any of the silences before. Cole was thinking back. Cole was running through 10 years of his life trying to figure out what I meant by Manchac, because we had been to Manchac 100 times together, and the word should have meant 100 different things. What about it? He said. Careful. Nothing, I said. Forget it. Adam. I gotta go, I said. Ellie's calling me. I'll call you back. I hung up before he could push. I sat on the porch step with the phone in my hand, and I looked across the street at the live oak and at the man under it. The street light at the corner came on. The man stayed where he was. He had been standing there 16 minutes by then. Ellie was not calling me. Ellie was inside watching some YouTube show with the volume too loud. I had lied to my brother for the first time I could remember since we were children. I had said the word Manchac because the word was already in my head and had been in my head since Tuesday night, even though I had not let myself put it into a sentence. The man across the street had been in my head. The shape of his coat had been in my head. The shape of the coat reminded me of something I had decided 10 years ago I had imagined. The bourbon was in the kitchen cabinet above the refrigerator. I went inside and got it. I told Mara I was going to do some work in the garage for an hour, which was a thing I sometimes did when I had a tricky bug to think through, and she did not look up from her papers because she was used to it. I took the bottle out the back door and through the yard and into the garage, and I closed the door behind me, and I sat down at the workbench, and I poured myself 2 fingers into a coffee mug that said Best Dad on it. I had been carrying this for 10 years. I had been carrying it so long I had convinced myself I was not carrying it. I had convinced myself it was a story I had told myself at the worst week of my life, the kind of thing a man does when his brother is dying and there is nothing left for him to do but invent ways to feel like he is still doing something. A man drives out to the swamp drunk in the middle of the night, and he talks to the dark, and a few months later his brother's tumor is gone, and the brain does the thing brains do when they need a story. The brain stitches the 2 events together. The brain says cause, the brain says trade. That was what I had decided. For 10 years. The bourbon was Buffalo Trace. It was the bottle Mara had bought me for Father's Day, and I had been working on it slowly because I was not much of a bourbon drinker. The mug said "Best Dad" because Ellie had given it to me when she was 5 and she had picked it out herself at a CVS on Carrollton, and the lettering was already faded from 100 trips through the dishwasher. I took a long drink, and I let the memory come. The oncologist had called Cole on a Tuesday morning in late September of the year I was 28. I remember it was a Tuesday because Cole had called me right after, and I had been at my desk at my old job, the startup that did not exist anymore, the one that had occupied the second floor of a building on Magazine Street that was now a furniture store. Cole had said brother, and then he had said the word esophageal, and then he had said the word stage 4, and then he had stopped talking because I think he had not gotten further than that in his own head yet. I had left work without telling anybody. I had walked down to my car on Magazine. I had driven out to the welding yard in Belle Chasse where Cole worked, and Cole had been waiting in the parking lot in his coveralls, and we had sat in my car for an hour. Cole had cried for the first minute, and then he had stopped because Cole did not cry, and then we had talked about the appointment. He had been having trouble swallowing for a few months. He had thought it was acid reflux. He had finally gone to the doctor because Renee had made him, and the doctor had ordered a scope, and the scope had found a tumor, and the tumor had spread. The doctor had said 6 months. The doctor had said maybe more with aggressive treatment, but probably 6 months. The doctor had said the words quality of life. Cole was 32. He had been with Renee for 4 years. He had been a welder for 5 years. Lacey was 4 years old, and she had been at home that morning because she was too little for school, and because Renee was a stay-at-home mama back then, and the two of them had been making cookies in the kitchen when Cole had called Renee from the doctor's office. I had driven Cole home that afternoon to Chalmette. I had sat with him and Renee at their kitchen table while Lacey watched a Dora the Explorer DVD in the living room. We had not told Lacey. We had not told our mother yet. We had not told anybody yet, because Cole had not been ready to say it out loud to anybody else. I had left Chalmette around 8 that night. I had not gone home. I had driven north. I had taken Highway 51 out of town the way Cole and I had driven it 100 times when we were younger, when we used to go up to Manchac in his truck to fish at the bridge, or to drink in the back of his truck at the fishing camp turnouts. The road past La Place where the swamp closes in on both sides. The road where the cypress stand in the water and the Spanish moss hangs down off the branches like wet curtains. The road I knew so well I did not have to think about it. I had a fifth of Jim Beam in the car that I had bought at a gas station outside Belle Chasse. I had been drinking it as I drove. I had been driving way too fast. I had not had a single thought in my head that was not the word no, and the word please, and the word brother. I do not remember much about that drive except the sound of the bottle on the passenger seat sliding back and forth as I took the curves too hard. I had pulled into the fishing camp turnout at maybe 10 o'clock at night, the turnout where Cole had thrown up after his bachelor party, the turnout where we had once caught a 5-pound bass on a worm in 20 minutes when we were 16 and 17, and Cole had run home to show our father, who had still been alive then, and our father had said, "Boy, I have never seen a fish that big out of Manchac in my life." The turnout where I had taken Mara on our third date because I had wanted to show her that the city did not end where the city ended. I had gotten out of the car. I had walked to the edge of the gravel where the gravel met the cypress and the water. I had screamed. I had screamed at the swamp for I do not know how long. I had screamed at God. I had screamed at my brother for being the kind of man who did not go to the doctor when he started having trouble swallowing. I had screamed at myself for not being the brother who got sick. I had screamed until my throat closed up and my voice was gone. And then I had sat down on the gravel and I had cried in a way I had not cried since our father had died. And I had drunk from the bottle until I was the kind of drunk where the body stops feeling like a thing you live inside. That was when the man at the turnout had spoken. I had not heard him walk up. I had not seen a car pull in. I had not heard his footsteps on the gravel. He had simply been there. standing about 10 feet away from me at the edge of the trees, in a heavy dark coat that was wrong for the heat. He had been a man in his 50s. He had been lean. He had been calm. "You sound like a man who has just lost something," he had said. I had been drunk enough that I had not been afraid. I had been drunk enough that I had answered him. I had told him about Cole. I had told him in 2 or 3 sentences. I had told him my brother was dying. I had told him I would do anything. The man had said the word anything back to me as a question. I had said yes. The man had said, "I can give him 10 more years. Cancer gone. Full life. He dies of old age. At the end of those 10 years, you owe me a decade returned. An equal decade in shape and value. Do you accept these terms?" The bottle had been in my hand. The Spanish moss had been hanging down off the cypress in the dark like wet curtains. The swamp had been making the small noises swamps make at night. The frogs and the bull alligators way out in the water, and the occasional splash of something I could not see. I had been 28 years old, and I had been the drunkest I had ever been, and I had been the brokenest I had ever been, and the man at the turnout had been waiting with his hands at his sides. I had said yes. The man had said the deal was struck. The man had turned. The man had walked back into the trees the way he had come, and I had not heard his footsteps then either, and after a minute I had not been able to see him any more, and the swamp had been quiet around me. I had stood up. I had walked back to the car. I had driven home. I do not remember the drive home. I remember waking up in my own bed the next morning with a hangover that should have killed me, and Mara making me drink Gatorade, and Mara crying because she had been worried sick and she had not been able to reach me on the phone all night. By January, the doctors could not find the tumor anymore. Cole had been clean. I had not told Cole what I had done at the turnout. I had not told Mara. I had not told anybody. I had decided over the next few years that I had not actually done anything at the turnout. I had decided that I had been drunk and broken, and that my mind had stitched together a man at a turnout and a remission a month later, because that was what minds did. I had decided that the man had been a story I had told myself. I had decided it so completely that I had not thought about Manchac in years. I had not thought about Manchac until Tuesday night, when a man in a heavy dark coat had been standing under the live oak across the street from my house. I sat at the workbench in the garage with the Best Dad mug and the bottle of Buffalo Trace, and I understood that the man at Manchac had not been a story. He had been a man. He had given my brother 10 years. The 10 years were up next week. I did not sleep that night either. I lay in the bed in the dark with Mara breathing beside me, and I listened to the ceiling fan turn, and I thought about the math. The deal had been struck in late September of the year. I was 28. I was 38 now. The anniversary was coming up in about 3 weeks, maybe 4. I tried to remember if it had been the last week of September or the first week of October, and I could not remember, because I had drunk so much that night that the exact date had never sat clean in my memory. I got up at 4:30 in the morning. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark with my coffee and watched the sky go from black to the dull dark blue that meant the sun was thinking about coming. Mara came downstairs at 6. She looked at me at the table and her face changed. She did not ask me what was wrong. She had asked me what was wrong on Wednesday night when I had come in from the garage, and I had told her nothing was wrong, and she had not believed me. She was not going to ask again until I was ready to answer. I told her I was going to take the day off. I told her I had a stomach thing. I told her I might drive up to Slidell and back to clear my head. She nodded. She kissed me on the top of the head. She said, "Okay, baby." She said, "Let me know if you need anything." She got Ellie up and dressed and fed and out the door for school. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and I waited for the house to be empty. At 8:30 in the morning, I got in my car and I drove out to Manchac. The drive was the same drive I had taken 10 years before, and the same kind of light, except this time I was sober and it was morning and the sun was coming up over the swamp. Highway 51 past the airport. Past La Place, the cypress closing in on both sides, the Spanish moss in the trees, the water on both sides of the road, dark and still, with the dawn pink coming down through the cypress in narrow shafts. I did not have the radio on. I did not have a coffee. I did not have anything in the car with me except the question of whether I would recognize the turnout when I came to it. I recognized it. It came up on my left around 9:40 in the morning. The bend, the lean of the cypress on the right side of the road. The rusted-out trailer, half swallowed by kudzu on the left, set back in the trees about 30 feet. The kind of trailer that had been on its way to being part of the swamp for so long that it had stopped looking like a trailer and had started looking like a low hill of leaves. The gravel turnoff, no sign. There had never been a sign. I turned in. The gravel popped under the tires. The car eased forward into the trees, and I came out of the trees into the small open patch of gravel where the turnout was, and I parked. I sat in the car for a long minute before I got out. It looked the way it had always looked. A patch of gravel maybe 40 feet wide and 60 feet deep, with the cypress all around and the water visible through the trees on the far side. A few beer cans here and there in the brush. A circle of old fire pit stones at the back of the gravel where somebody at some point had built a campfire. The no trespassing sign on a leaning post off to the right, which I noticed was a sign that had been there for 10 years too, the same rust pattern, the same lean, the same illegibility. I got out. I walked to the spot where I had stood that night. I looked around. I do not know what I had expected. I think I had expected the place to feel different. I think I had expected the air to feel different, the way they say the air feels at a graveyard or a battlefield. I had expected the cypress to be too still, or the water to be too quiet, or the light to come down wrong. The air was the air. The cypress was the cypress. The water was the water. The light came down through the moss, the way it always had. A heron stood on the edge of the water about 100 feet out and looked at me, and then looked away, and then went back to looking for whatever herons look for in the morning. A truck went by on the highway behind me, and the sound of it came through the trees and faded. There was nothing here. There was nothing here in daylight. I walked around the gravel. I walked to the edge of the water. I walked to the no trespassing sign and read the sign again because I felt like I was supposed to be doing something. The sign said no trespassing. The sign said violators would be prosecuted. The sign said it was the property of somebody whose name I could not make out anymore because the sign was older than I was. I went back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open and my legs out on the gravel. I waited for something. I do not know what I was waiting for. I was waiting for the man to step out of the trees. I was waiting for the moss to move. I was waiting for the heron to say something to me. I waited for an hour and a half. Nothing happened. I drove home. I came in the back door around noon. The house was empty. Mar had texted me that she had brought Ellie home for lunch and was running her over to her sister's house in Metairie for the afternoon because the sister had wanted some help with the niece. I had not seen the text because I had not been looking at my phone. I sat on the couch in the living room with the lights off. I did not turn on the TV. I did not turn on any music. I just sat. After a while, I went upstairs to my office. The office was the second bedroom of our house, the room that would have been a nursery if we had had another kid. Mara had wanted another kid. We had tried for 2 years. We had not been able to. We had stopped trying in the third year, and we had not talked about it again, and the room had become my office instead. The office was where I kept the old photo albums. Mara is a person who prints out pictures. She has always done this. She prints them out every 6 months from her phone, and she puts them in albums that she keeps on the bottom shelf of a bookcase in my office. There are 8 albums now. They go back to the year before we got married. I pulled out the album from the year Cole had been sick. I opened it on my desk. The first picture in the album was a picture of Cole at our parents' Thanksgiving table the year of the diagnosis. He was sitting at the head of the table where our father had always sat. Our father had died when Cole and I were in our early 20s. Cole had taken over the head of the table at family events the year after, the way the oldest son does when the father is gone. The picture had been taken about a month after the diagnosis, but a couple weeks before he had started chemo. He looked thin. He looked tired. He still looked like Cole. The next picture was Cole on the porch of his house in Chalmette, sometime in early December that year. He was wearing a knit cap because his hair was already starting to go. His skin had that gray color you get when you have been throwing up for 2 weeks. He weighed maybe 140 pounds. Cole had always weighed around 200 when he was healthy. I am taller than him by an inch, and I weighed 220 back then. In that picture, he looked like a man 2 years older than himself. There were maybe a dozen more pictures across that fall. Cole sicker each time. Cole at our mother's house at Christmas. Cole at his own kitchen table with a juice box in his hand, because they had told him to keep his calories up however he could. Cole on a hospital bed with a port in his chest, his eyes closed. Renee in the background, half out of frame. The last picture in that stretch of the album was Cole on New Year's Eve. He weighed about 130 pounds. He had no hair. He had a beanie pulled down past his ears. His skin was the color of dishwater. He was holding Lacey on his lap, and Lacey was holding a sparkler, and the sparkler was the only light in the picture, and the light made everything around it look more dead than dead. The next picture in the album was from late January. Cole was at our mother's kitchen table. He was eating gumbo. He had hair coming back and short and dark on his head. His face had filled out. He had put on maybe 15 pounds. He was smiling at the camera. Our mother was behind him with her hand on his shoulder, and our mother was smiling too. Our mother had never smiled at the camera in his presence during the months he had been sick. She had not had it in her. I sat at my desk and I looked at the two pictures side by side. The doctors had not been able to explain it. I remember that. They had used the word miracle in writing. There had been a follow-up scan in early January because the chemo had not seemed to be doing what they had wanted it to be doing, and the scan had not been able to find the tumor anywhere. They had run it 3 times. They had brought in another doctor. The other doctor had not been able to find it either. The tumor had been there in October, and the tumor had been there in early December, and the tumor had been gone in January, and nobody had been able to explain it. And after about 6 weeks of trying to explain it, everybody had just given up trying. Cole had been a medical mystery for about 2 months, and then he had been a healthy welder again, and nobody had asked any more questions, and we had all moved on. I turned the page in the album. Cole at his own birthday in February, Cole back at work in March, Cole and Renee on a beach in Destin in May, his hair grown out, his weight back, Cole standing next to me at my wedding to Mara in October of that next year, his hand on my shoulder, the two of us in tuxedos, both of us grinning the way brothers grin in wedding photos. I turned the page again. Mara, pregnant with Ellie. Ellie's first ultrasound. Ellie's birth. Cole at the hospital holding Ellie when she was a day old. Cole's face the kind of face an uncle makes when he is meeting his niece for the first time. I sat at the desk a long time looking at the picture of Cole holding Ellie. I did the math. Mara and I had started trying for a baby about a year after the wedding. Ellie had been born 2.5 years after that. Ellie had been conceived 2 years and 7 months after Cole's miraculous remission. Mara had had 2 miscarriages in the years we were trying. We had given up on the idea of another child after Ellie because the second pregnancy and the third pregnancy had both ended around the 8-week mark, and Mara had decided she could not do it again, and I had agreed with her because I had not wanted to see her go through it again. Ellie existed because Cole had lived. I am not saying she existed because of some specific cause and effect, although there had been a cause and effect, because the year Cole was sick had been a year Mara and I had not even considered trying for a child, and the timing of when we had started had been tied up with the year of Cole's remission and the wedding and the buying of the house, and any of those events going differently would have meant a different Ellie or no Ellie at all. But that was not the math I was doing. The math I was doing was simpler than that. The deal had been 10 years for Cole. 10 years of life he was not supposed to have. 10 years he had spent being a husband to Renee and a father to Lacey and an uncle to my daughter. 10 years of welding for a living and coming home to a brick ranch in Chalmette and grilling on Sundays and watching the Saints lose with me on Sundays after that. 10 good years. The years a man wants. 32 to 42. The man at the turnout had given Cole those years. The man had said an equal decade returned. He had not said whose. He had said an equal decade in shape and value. I closed the album. I sat at my desk a long time. The afternoon sun came through the office window and moved slowly across the wall behind my desk the way the afternoon sun does in September in New Orleans, soft and yellow and long. I did not move. I sat with my hands on the closed album and I tried to think about what I was thinking about, and I could not, because I could not look directly at it yet. I could not look directly at it because my daughter was 8 years old and her next 10 years were the decade that mattered most in a human life. The decade where a person becomes the person they will be. 8 to 18. Childhood to adulthood. The decade Cole had been given in shape and value. I sat with the math. The math sat with me. After a while I got up. I went downstairs. I started cooking dinner because Mara was going to be home with Ellie in about an hour and a half, and I had not done anything useful with my day except drive out to a turnout in the swamp and look at old photographs of my dying brother. I made pasta. I made meatballs. I opened a jar of rouse because I was too tired to make sauce. I set the table. I poured myself a Modelo. I did not go out on the porch with it. I sat at the kitchen table and waited for my wife and my daughter to come home. Mara came in the back door at 6:15 with Ellie behind her. Ellie was carrying a paper plate of cookies her aunt had given her. Ellie ran over to me and held up the plate and said, "Look, Daddy," and said her aunt had let her decorate them with the sprinkles. The cookies had so many sprinkles on them they had stopped looking like cookies. I told her they were beautiful. I kissed her on the head. I asked her how her aunt was. She told me her aunt had let her hold the baby. Mara looked at me for a long moment over Ellie's head while she was telling me about the baby. Mara had been my wife for 9 years. Mara could read me the way other people read the weather. I gave her my best version of a normal smile, which I knew was not very good, and she did not press. We ate dinner. We watched Ellie eat her cookies. We watched a movie on the couch, all three of us, Ellie between us, Mara's hand on my knee. The movie was something with a talking dog. I did not pay attention to it. At 7:45, I excused myself and stood up off the couch and went to the bathroom. I waited 2 minutes and then I came out and I told Mara I needed to grab the mail. I went out the front door onto the porch. The man was across the street. He was under the live oak. He was facing my house. The street light at the corner was on. The light was almost gone in the sky. My phone said 7:47. I stood on the porch and I looked at him, and he looked at my porch, and I understood that he was not just standing there waiting. He was telling me something. He was telling me that he was here. He was telling me that the 10 years were almost up. He was telling me that the bill was coming, and that he wanted me to know it was coming, so that when he sat down at my table to collect, I would not be surprised. I went back inside. I sat on the couch with my wife and my daughter and the talking dog. Ellie fell asleep on my arm halfway through the movie. Mara carried her upstairs. I stayed on the couch. Mara came back down. She stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at me. "Adam," she said. I looked up at her. "Whatever it is," she said, "I will be here when you are ready." She did not wait for me to answer. She went upstairs to bed. I sat on the couch with the talking dog movie still playing on low. I sat there until 11. Then I went out to the garage with the Buffalo Trace, and I sat at the workbench with the Best Dad mug, and I drank, and I tried to figure out what a man does when the bill is coming and the bill is not what he agreed to pay. The garage door was open to the backyard. The cicadas were loud in the trees in the alley. The neighbor's dog was barking at something a few houses down. The light from the kitchen window was a yellow square on the concrete of the driveway. The man was standing at the end of the driveway. He had not been there when I had come out. The driveway had been empty. The street had been empty. And now he was at the end of the driveway, about 20 feet from where I was sitting, with his hands at his sides in his heavy dark coat, facing me. I did not stand up. I did not put down the mug. I sat at the workbench, and I looked at him. He looked at me. He did not come closer. He did not speak. After maybe a minute, he was not there anymore. The driveway was empty again. The dog was still barking. I went into the house. I locked the door behind me. I went upstairs. I lay down on the bed next to Mara, and Mara rolled over in her sleep and put her hand on my chest, and I lay there in the dark and watched the ceiling fan turn, and I did not sleep. He had moved closer. That was what I understood. He had been across the street on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Now he was at the end of my driveway. He was working his way to the porch. He was working his way to the door. He was on a schedule, and the schedule was about 3 weeks. And on whatever night the schedule ended, I was going to open my eyes in the dark, and the man was going to be standing at the foot of my bed. I did not sleep at all that night. The next morning was Saturday. Cole drove in from Chalmette at 11. I heard his truck before I saw it. Cole drives an F-150 that he bought in 2018, and the muffler on it has been on its way out for about 3 years. And it makes a sound when he comes down a street that I would know from a block away. The truck pulled into my driveway and idled for a minute. Then the engine cut off. Then the door slammed. Then there was a quiet on the driveway that meant Cole was standing there figuring out what he was going to say to me before he came inside. I was in the kitchen. I had not told Mara that Cole was coming because I had not known Cole was coming. He had not called ahead. Cole did not show up unannounced. Cole called. I went out the back door and around to the driveway. He was leaning against the side of his truck with his arms crossed. He had a small cooler set down on the gravel of the driveway next to him. He had been crying, or he had been close to it, and he was a man who did not cry in front of his brother in 20 years, but his eyes were red and his face was set. "Brother," I said. "Adam," he said. I jerked my chin at the cooler. "What's in it?" "Modlos." "Garage?" "Garage." I picked up the cooler, and we walked together around the side of the house and through the back gate. I had not closed the garage door from the night before. The bottle of Buffalo Trace was still on the workbench where I had left it. The Best Dad mug was next to it. Cole looked at the mug and at the bottle, and he did not say anything, because he did not have to. I rolled the garage door down behind us. Not all the way. About 3/4. Enough to give us privacy, without making the garage feel like a room we were trapped in. The light was the gray light a garage gets when the door is most of the way down on a cloudy Saturday morning. Cole opened the cooler. He pulled out a Modelo for himself and a Modelo for me. He pried both caps off on the edge of the workbench, which is a thing Cole has done since he was 16 and which our mother has never approved of, and which has never put a single mark on any piece of furniture he has done it to. We sat. He took the stool. I sat on a cinder block I keep next to the workbench, because I have never gotten around to buying another stool. He took a long drink. He looked at me. "Talk to me," he said. "About what?" Don't what? Don't make me chase you on this. You said the word Manchac to me on Thursday, and I have been sitting with it for 2 days, and you and I are going to talk about it right now." I took a long drink of my own beer. I looked at the floor of the garage. "You feel anything when you hear that word?" I said. "Manchac." I feel a lot of things when I hear that word. I have been hearing that word since I was old enough to fish. Recently. Cole was quiet a moment. "I have been having a dream," he said. "About 4 nights now. I am at one of the turnouts up there, the one we used to go to. I am standing at the edge of the gravel, and I am looking out at the water, and there is somebody standing next to me, but when I try to look at him, I cannot turn my head." I closed my eyes. "Same coat?" I said. "What?" "Same coat as the man across the street from your house." I opened my eyes. Cole was looking at me. His face was the face he made when he was 12 and our father was about to punish him for something, and he was trying to decide whether to lie about it or come clean. "I don't know," he said. "Probably. I cannot turn my head in the dream." I drank my beer. I put the bottle down on the workbench. I picked the bottle back up. I put it down again. 10 years ago, I said. "The night they told you about the tumor. I drove out to Manchac after I dropped you off." "Okay," he said. I was drunk. I was the drunkest I have ever been. I had a bottle of Jim Beam in the car, and I was drinking it while I drove, which is the thing I should have died for, and somehow did not. I pulled in at the fishing camp turnout, the one with the rusted-out trailer in the trees on the left side of the turnoff. You know the one I mean. I know the one. I got out of the car, and I screamed at the swamp, for I do not know how long. I screamed at God. I screamed at our Father. I screamed at you for not going to the doctor sooner. Then I sat down on the gravel and I drank. Cole was watching me. He did not say anything. A man came out of the trees. I did not hear him walk up. I did not hear a car. He was just there. Lean. Older. Heavy coat. Cole's jaw moved a little. He said I sounded like a man who had just lost something. I told him you were dying. I told him I would do anything. He said he could give you 10 more years. Cancer gone. Full life. He said at the end of 10 years, I would owe him a decade back. He used the words, equal decade in shape and value. He asked me, did I accept the terms? I said yes. He turned around and he walked back into the trees, and I drove home, and a month later you were clean. I stopped. I did not look at Cole. I looked at the cinder block I was sitting on. For 10 years I told myself I had made him up. I said. I told myself I had been drunk and broken, and that my brain had stitched the two events together. I told myself there was no man. I told myself I had not made any deal. Cole did not say anything. I made myself look at him. He was looking at me with an expression I could not read. He was not laughing. He was not angry. He was not crying. His face was very still. His hands were on his knees, and his fingers were tight enough that the knuckles were white. Brother, he said. Yeah? Are you fucking with me right now? No, because if you are fucking with me right now, I am not fucking with you, Cole. I would not. Not about this. Not about you. He stood up off the stool. He walked to the open part of the garage door and looked out at the yard and at the alley fence beyond it and at the sky, which had gone gray in the way the sky goes gray in New Orleans on a September morning when there is going to be a thunderstorm in the afternoon. He stood there for maybe a minute. I did not say anything. He turned around. I have not been able to remember a single thing about the week they told me about the tumor, he said. I have not been able to remember it for 10 years. I remember Renee crying in the doctor's office. I remember the drive home with you. And then there is nothing. There is a black hole in my head for about a month after that. I had told myself it was the chemo brain. I had told myself it was the fear. I had told myself it was a thing minds did when they were processing something. Yeah, that black hole has been getting bigger over the last week. What does that mean? It means I am starting to remember things that are not memories I should have. I am remembering a man in a coat. I am remembering him sitting in the chair next to my hospital bed when nobody else was in the room. I am remembering him looking down at Lacey when she was 4 and Lacey was sitting on the floor of my bedroom coloring while I was supposed to be sleeping. I am remembering him telling me thank you. I am remembering thank you for what? He sat back down on the stool. He took a long drink. His hand was shaking a little. I never told you any of that, he said. You couldn't have. I had no memory of any of it until last week. Now I have all of it. Last night I lay in bed and I closed my eyes and I remembered him as clear as if he had been there 10 minutes ago, the way he stood, the way his coat hung on him, the smell of him. What did he smell like? Cold, Cole said. He smelled cold, like the inside of a freezer chest with nothing in it, like a place where things keep. We sat in the gray light of the garage with our beers, and neither of us said anything for a while. The cicadas were going in the trees in the alley. Somewhere a few streets over, a guy was running a leaf blower. The garage smelled like motor oil and concrete and the small amount of mildew that lives in a New Orleans garage no matter what you do about it. Why is he back? Cole said. I did not answer. Adam, the 10 years are up next week, maybe 2 weeks. He came to collect. Cole was quiet a long time. What does he want? He said. I do not know yet. You know, I do not know. He looked at me hard. He had always been able to look at me hard, and I had never been able to lie to him while he was doing it. We had figured this out when we were children. Cole could look at me, and I could not hold the lie. You know what he wants, he said. I have an idea what he wants. I do not know yet. I have to go ask him. Go ask him. Drive out to the turnout, talk to him, see what he says. Cole shook his head. I am coming with you. No, brother. No, Cole. You are not coming. I made this deal. I am going to deal with it. You made this deal for me, and I am going to deal with it. You are going to go home. You are going to be with Renee and Lacey. You are going to act normal. You are going to let me handle this. He was about to argue with me. I could see him about to argue with me. He had always been the older brother, and he had always been the one who handled the hard things, and he was about to tell me that this was no different. I held up my hand. Cole, I said, please. He shut his mouth. He drank his beer. He looked at the floor of the garage. Okay, he said. For now. We sat in the garage until the cooler was empty. We talked about things that were not the man in the coat. We talked about Lacey starting high school. We talked about a leak Cole had in his roof that he was thinking about fixing himself. We talked about whether the Saints had a quarterback. We talked the way brothers talk when they have agreed not to talk about the thing that is on both of their minds. He left around 2. He hugged me before he got in his truck. He had not hugged me on a driveway in maybe 15 years. He smelled the way he had always smelled, like cigarettes and Old Spice and welding flux, and the underlying clean smell that was just coal, which I had known since I was the size of his thigh. He said, brother. I said, brother. He drove away. I went back into the house. Mara was at the kitchen table with her laptop open, grading. She looked up at me as I came in. Cole came by, I said. I heard the truck. Everything okay? Yeah, I said. Just brother stuff. HM. She went back to her grading. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her for a minute. She was wearing her reading glasses and her hair was up in a bun, and there was a smear of pen ink on the side of her hand where she had been writing notes in the margins of an essay. She had been my wife for 9 years, and we had been together for almost 12. There was no version of my life that did not have her in it. There was no version of my life I was willing to imagine in which I told her about the man. I went upstairs and took a shower. I stood under the water a long time. I let it run cold. I let it run hot. I let it run cold again. I came out of the shower, into the bedroom, and Mara was sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her lap. Adam, she said. Yeah, I need to ask you something. I sat down next to her, in my towel. The bed gave under me. I put my hand on her knee. Are you having an affair? She said. I think I had known she was going to ask. I think I had been waiting for it since Wednesday. I do not think I would have known how to answer it if I had not been waiting for it. No, I said. Okay. I am not, Mara. I would not. You know that. I know. What made you ask? She turned her phone face down on her lap. She looked at me. Her eyes were her serious eyes, the eyes she had when a thing mattered, and she was not going to be deflected. Because something is wrong with you, she said, and you are not telling me what it is. And in my experience, when a man stops sleeping and stops eating and goes out to the porch at exactly 7:47 every night to look at nothing for 15 minutes, the answer is usually either an affair or a gambling problem, or he is sick and he has not told anybody yet. I needed to rule out the easy one first. I am not having an affair. I am not gambling. I am not sick. Then what? I sat with my hand on her knee. I felt the warmth of her leg through the towel. I felt the water still cooling on my back. I felt the way she was waiting, patient, the way she always waited, the way she would wait for as long as it took. It is family stuff, I said. It is Cole. It is something between him and me that goes back 10 years. I cannot tell you yet. I am going to tell you. I just cannot tell you yet. She looked at me a long moment. Is it dangerous? What? Whatever you are doing, whatever is going on with Cole. Is it dangerous? Are you in danger? Is Ellie in danger? Are we in danger? No, I said. I said it too fast. I knew I had said it too fast as soon as the word was out. Mara knew I had said it too fast. We sat together on the edge of the bed, and the lie sat between us in the air, and she did not call me on it, and I did not take it back, and the moment passed. Okay, she said. She got up, she left the bedroom, she went downstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed in my towel for a long time before I got up and got dressed. That night I drove back out to Manchac. I did not tell Mara I was going. I waited until she and Ellie were asleep, which was around 10, and then I went out the back door and I started the car and I backed down the driveway with the headlights off until I was on the street, and then I turned the headlights on and I drove. The drive was different at night. I had taken the drive at night 10 years ago, and I had taken it in the morning 2 days before, but I had not taken it at night since the original drive. The road from the place north is a road that lives differently in the dark. The cypress on both sides comes in closer. The water on both sides goes away into black. The Spanish moss hangs down over the road in places where it has grown long enough to brush the top of a tall truck, and the headlights catch in the moss and make it look like the road is going through a tunnel made of curtains. I drove with the radio off. I drove with the window cracked. I could hear the swamp through the window, the frogs and the bull alligators and the occasional thing splashing in the water that I could not see and did not want to. I came to the turnout. I turned in. The headlights came across the gravel, and I saw, for 1 second, before my eyes had adjusted to the brightness, what looked like a black Lincoln Continental parked at the back of the turnout near the fire pit stones. Then the headlights moved, and the car was gone. I drove forward into the turnout. There was no Lincoln. There was just the gravel and the cypress and the no trespassing sign. I parked. I cut the engine. I cut the headlights. I sat in the dark. The dark in a swamp at night is not the dark of a city street. The dark in a swamp is alive. The dark in a swamp is made of frogs and crickets, and the deep low groan of bullfrogs, and the sudden snap of a branch off in the trees, and the deeper silence underneath all of it, that is the silence of the water, which does not make any sound at all. The dark in a swamp does not feel empty. The dark in a swamp feels full of things that are listening to you. I got out of the car. I closed the door quietly. I do not know why. There was nobody to disturb. There was nobody to hear. But I closed the door quietly. I walked to the spot where I had stood 10 years ago, the spot where the gravel met the line of cypress. I stopped there. I am here, I said into the dark. Nothing answered. I know it has been 10 years. I know what we agreed to. I am here to talk about it. Nothing answered. I stood for a long time. The mosquitoes were on my arms and my neck. I did not slap them. I let them bite. I do not know why. It felt like I should let them. It felt like I should not move. After a while, the small sounds of the swamp stopped. It happened slowly. The frogs went quiet first, then the crickets, then the bullfrogs. The silence came in across the turnout from the trees, and the silence kept coming until there was no sound at all. I have never heard a swamp go that quiet. I have spent enough hours of my life in Louisiana swamps to know that swamps do not go quiet. There is always something. Frogs in the spring, crickets in the summer, the wind in the moss in any season. A swamp is never silent. This one was silent. The man stepped out of the trees about 10 feet to my left. He did not walk out. He did not step around the trunk of a cypress. He was not there, and then his coat was the same coat. His hands were at his sides. He was the same height as he had been 10 years ago. He was the same age as he had been 10 years ago, which was a thing I had not noticed about the man across the street, but which I noticed now, because if you had asked me 10 years ago how old he was, I would have said 55. And if you had asked me an hour ago how old he was, I would have said 55. You remember, he said. His voice was the voice from 10 years ago. I knew it the way I had known Cole's voice on the phone on Thursday. There are voices that get in and do not leave. I remember, I said. Then you know why I am here. The 10 years. I had been standing with my hands in my pockets. I took my hands out of my pockets. I do not know why. I think I wanted my hands to be where I could see them. I want to talk to you about the deal, I said. The deal was clear. It was not clear to me. He did not answer that. He waited. You said an equal decade in shape and value, I said. I thought you meant mine. I thought you were taking 10 years off my life. I thought I was paying with myself. You assumed. Yes, I did not say so. You did not say otherwise. That is correct. He was very calm. He stood with his hands at his sides, and he looked at me with the same kind of patient stillness he had had at the end of the driveway the night before. He was not a threatening man. He was the opposite of a threatening man. He was the way a foreman at a job site is when the foreman has been doing the work 20 years and has nothing to prove and is just trying to get the day done. Take it from me, I said. Take 10 years off the end of my life. Take 15. Take all of it. Take whatever you need. Your remaining years are not sufficient. What do you mean not sufficient? They are not equivalent to what was given. They will not balance the books. What does that mean? He looked at me a long moment. The years given to your brother were prime years, he said. He was 32 when the cancer would have taken him. He was given his prime decade back. He spent it being a husband. He spent it being a father. He spent it being a brother and a son and a working man at the height of his strength. Those are the most alive years a person has. Yes. Your remaining years are not those years. You are 38. The next decade of your life is the decade of a man who has already become who he is going to become. The work years are the work years. They are not the years you grew. They are not the years that made you. They are not the years of equivalent value. I stood in the dark, and I felt the math close in around me. I had done the math at my desk in the afternoon, and I had not let myself look at it directly. He was looking at it directly. He was looking at it for me. He was saying it out loud in the dark with the swamp silent around us, and there was no way to look away. The only equivalent decade in your bloodline is the decade ahead of your daughter, he said. She is 8. She has from 8 to 18 ahead of her. Childhood into adulthood. The years that make a person. That decade balances the books. That decade is the price. I sat down on the gravel. I do not remember deciding to sit. I do not remember my knees going. I was standing, and then I was sitting on the gravel with my hands in front of me and the air in my lungs gone, and the man was standing the same distance away from me, not moving. Please, I said. The terms are set. She is 8 years old. Yes, please. I am not unkind, he said. I am not cruel. I do not enjoy this. I am only the agreement made flesh. The deal was struck. The deal must be paid. Take me. You cannot match. Take everything I have. Take everything I will ever be. You cannot match. The math is the math. I sat on the gravel a long time. I did not look up. I could feel him standing there. I could feel the air around him, which was different from the air around me, the way the air feels different around a deep freezer when you open the lid. After a while he spoke again. The collection has begun, he said. I looked up. He was already gone. The gravel where he had been was empty. The cypress was just cypress. The Spanish moss hung down off the branches the way it always hung down. The sounds of the swamp came back. The frogs first, then the crickets, then the bullfrogs out in the water. The night filled itself back in around me, and I sat on the gravel of the turnout, and I understood that there was nothing in this world that was going to let me out of what I had done 10 years ago when I had been 28 and drunk and out of options. I drove home. I do not remember most of the drive. I came in the back door at 1:30 in the morning, and I went upstairs, and I stood in the doorway of Ellie's bedroom, and I looked at her sleeping. She was on her side with her hand under her cheek, the way she had slept since she was a baby. The nightlight by her bed was a small, soft pink that lit her face from below. The room smelled like the lavender lotion Mara put on her after her bath. She was 8 years old. She had a stuffed elephant under her arm. I stood in the doorway for a long time, and I watched her breathe, and I tried not to make any sound, and after a while I went into our bedroom, and I lay down in the bed next to Mara, and Mara rolled over in her sleep and put her arm across my chest, and I lay there in the dark, and I did not sleep. I got up at 5:30. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark and drank it, and watched the kitchen window go from black to the dull blue that meant the sun was coming. Mara came down at 6:15. She looked at me at the table and her face did the thing it had been doing for the last week, which was wanting to ask and choosing not to. You did not sleep, she said. No, Adam, I know. She made her own coffee. She sat across from me at the table. She did not open her laptop. She did not get out the stack of essays. She sat with her coffee and she looked at me. And after a minute she put her hand on top of mine where it was on the table. Whatever it is, she said. I know. I am not asking you to tell me. I am telling you I am here. I know, Mara. We sat that way until Ellie came down. Ellie came down at 6:45 in her pajamas with her hair every which way, dragging her stuffed elephant by one ear. She climbed up in my lap and put her head against my chest. She did this most mornings. I did not always have time for it. I had time for it that morning. I sat with her in my lap and I held her against me, and I felt her small ribs under my arm, and I felt her hair against my chin, and I did not say anything. After a minute, she lifted her head. Daddy, I have something to show you. Okay, Sweet Pea. It is in my backpack. I made it at school yesterday. Okay. She got down off my lap. She went to the front hall where her backpack hung on the hook by the door. She brought the backpack back to the kitchen and set it on the table and unzipped it. She pulled out a folder. She pulled out a stack of papers from the folder. She set them in front of me. My teacher said, draw your family, Ellie said. We got to use crayons and markers and one piece of construction paper. I did the construction paper for the background because mine is the best. I looked down at the top drawing. It was on dark blue construction paper. Ellie had drawn the front of our house in the middle of the paper, the way an 8-year-old draws a house, with the door in the middle and 2 windows, and the porch with the railing and the steps going down to the sidewalk. She had drawn me on the porch in a brown shirt. She had drawn Mara in the doorway. She had drawn herself in the yard with her bike. She had drawn our cat, who had died 2 years ago, sitting next to me on the porch railing, because Ellie still drew our cat in every family picture, and I had stopped asking her not to. Across the street, under the live oak, she had drawn a man. The man was in a dark coat. The man had his hands at his sides. The man was facing the porch. I held the drawing in my hands. I looked at it. I felt the kitchen go far away around me. I could hear Mara saying something to Ellie about how nice the drawing was. I could hear Ellie answering her. I could hear my own breathing. I could not put the drawing down. Sweet Pea, I said, and my voice was strange. Yeah, Daddy. Who's the man across the street? She came around to my side of the table and leaned against my arm and looked at the drawing with me. That is the man who waits, she said. The man who waits, I said. H.M. Where did you see him, Sweet Pea? He is across the street sometimes when I ride my bike. He's in my room sometimes too. I stopped breathing for a moment. I made myself breathe again. I made my voice be a voice. He is in your room sometimes. He stands in my doorway after Mama turns the light off. He does not come in, he just stands. Does he say anything? No. He just stands. How long, Sweet Pea? She thought about it. She had her hand on my arm and her cheek against my shoulder. Maybe like 2 weeks, she said. Maybe more. I told Mama about him one time, and Mama said it was my imagination. I looked across the table at Mara. Mara was looking at the drawing. Her face had gone very still. She had not seen the drawing yet. I had not handed it to her. She was looking at it from where she was sitting, and she was looking at the part of the drawing where the man was under the live oak, and her mouth had opened a small amount and not closed. Ellie, Mara said, you did not tell me about a man in your doorway. I told you. I said there was a man, and you said it was probably a dream. When did you tell me that, Sweet Pea? Last week. Maybe the week before. Mara did not answer for a moment. I could see her trying to remember the conversation. I could see her finding the conversation in her memory the way a person finds a thing they had not given the right weight to at the time. I could see the moment she found it. Her face did a small thing. You did tell me, she said. I told you. You did, Sweet Pea. I am sorry I did not listen better. Ellie shrugged. It is okay. He is not scary. He just stands there. Mara looked at me. I looked at Mara. We did not say anything to each other across the table because there was no way for us to say what we were saying to each other in front of Ellie. Mara's face had donned the color of the wall. "Okay," I said. I made my voice be a normal voice. "Sweet pea, that is a really good drawing. Will you let me keep it on my desk at work?" "You can have it, Daddy." "Okay. Can I have orange juice?" "Yes." Mara got up and got Ellie orange juice. I sat at the table with the drawing in my hands. I looked at the man under the live oak. Ellie had drawn the coat in gray. She had drawn the hands at his sides. She had drawn the face as a smudge of brown crayon with no features, because she had not been able to see the face well enough to draw the features. The figure was the right shape and the right height and the right wrongness against the rest of the picture, where everything else was drawn in the careful round shapes of a child who liked to draw. She had drawn him because he was part of her world now. She had drawn him next to me and her mother and our dead cat, because she had decided he was part of the family of things that lived on our block. Mara got Ellie ready for school. I drove Ellie. I dropped her off at the gate. I watched her walk away into the building with her backpack slung over one shoulder and her hair in the ponytail Mara had put it in. I drove home. I did not go to work that morning. I emailed Gavin and told him I had a family emergency. I told him I would not be in for at least a couple of days. He emailed back and said, "No worries. Take whatever time you need," which is the kind of thing a product manager says when he has been waiting for an opportunity to be a decent person to the engineer he has been giving a hard time, and which I had no energy to feel any gratitude for. I came in the back door. Mara was in the kitchen, sitting at the table where I had been sitting an hour before. The drawing was on the table in front of her. She had been looking at it the entire time I had been gone. She looked up when I came in. "Adam," she said. I sat down across from her. "Sit down," she said. "I am sitting down." She did not smile. "You are going to tell me," she said. "You are going to tell me right now. Whatever this is. Whatever has been going on for the last 2 weeks. Whatever Cole came over to talk about yesterday. Whatever you went out to do last night when you thought I did not hear you start the car. You are going to tell me right now. Because that drawing is my daughter telling me that there has been a man in her bedroom and I did not listen the first time, and I am not going to be the kind of mother who does not listen the second time." She had been holding back tears. They came down now. She did not wipe them. She let them come. I sat across from her. I looked at her. I looked at the drawing. I looked at my hands. "You will not believe me," I said. "Try." So I told her all of it. The drive 10 years ago, the man at the turnout, the deal, the terms I had thought I was agreeing to, and the terms I had actually agreed to, the remission, the decade, the bill coming due, the man across the street, the man at the end of the driveway, the visit to the turnout the morning before, the visit to the turnout last night, the thing the man had told me about my daughter and her decade. I told her in a flat voice from start to finish, because I did not have any other voice in me. I told her in maybe 15 minutes, sitting at the kitchen table with the drawing between us, and Mara did not interrupt me once. When I was done, she did not say anything for a long time. "You are not lying to me," she said finally. "No, you are not making this up. No, you have been carrying this for 10 years. I had convinced myself. I had imagined it. I had convinced myself for 10 years, until last week. Adam, I am sorry, Mara. I am so sorry." She reached across the table and took my hand. She held it very hard. Her hand was cold. Her cheeks were wet. She held my hand, looked at me, and did not say anything for a long minute, and then she said the thing I had been afraid she was going to say. "What do we do?" "I do not know yet." "Tell me what we do." "I am going to figure out what we do." "Adam, Mara, I am going to figure it out. I do not know yet. There has to be a way out. There has to be." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked at the drawing on the table between us. She picked it up. She held it in both hands, and she looked at it. She looked at the figure under the live oak. She looked at our daughter in the yard with her bike. "Get her out of the house," she said. "What?" "Send her to my sister's, to my mother's in Lafayette, anywhere. Get her out of the house." Mara, he found her at school. He drew her into a school drawing. The man is not bound by the house. He is bound by her. Sending her somewhere is not going to do anything. Are you sure? I am not sure of anything, but that is what I think. She put the drawing back on the table. She put her hands over her face. She sat that way for maybe 30 seconds. Then she dropped her hands and looked at me. Then we find a way out, she said. Together. We figure this out. We do not lose her. We do not lose her. Promise me. I promise you, Mara. I did not know if I was lying. I did not know if there was a way out. The man had been very clear at the turnout. The terms were the terms. The math was the math. I had felt the certainty of it standing there in the dark with the silence around me, the certainty of a thing that had been decided 10 years ago and could not be undecided. I had felt it the way a man feels the weather change. There was no fighting it. But I promised her. We sat at the kitchen table a long time. We held each other's hand across the table. Neither of us cried again. The morning sun came in through the kitchen window and crossed the table and moved on, the way the morning sun does. After a while, Mara got up. She made me a sandwich. She made herself a sandwich. We ate. We did not talk. The drawing was on the table between us the whole time, and after we ate, Mara folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept the good silverware, the drawer we did not open often, and she closed the drawer. The week between the night at the turnout and the Sunday Cole disappeared was the longest week I have ever lived through. I went back to work on Tuesday. I emailed Gavin a story about a sick aunt in Lafayette that I had used to cover the missing days, and I sat at my desk in the office downtown and I tried to write code and I stared at the screen. I did not write any code. I sat and stand up at 9 and I let Gavin talk about a button, and I did not say anything. I went to lunch alone every day. I came home at 5. I sat with Ellie at the kitchen table and helped her with her math, and I read with her at night. I tried to be a father. I tried to be a husband. Mara was different in a way only I could see. She was quieter. She watched Ellie too closely. She came into Ellie's room 3 or 4 times a night to check on her. She kept the door to Ellie's room open, a crack with the hallway light on, which we had stopped doing when Ellie was 5. She and I lay in the bed at night, both of us awake, neither of us speaking, both of us listening for footsteps in the hallway. The man was not across the street that week. He was not at the end of the driveway. He was not under the live oak. He was not anywhere I could see him. Ellie said he was in her doorway one night that week, just standing there, the way he stood. I sat in her room until she went to sleep. I sat in a chair in the corner with my phone in my hand pretending to read it, and I watched the doorway, and I did not see him. Ellie said, "You can go now, Daddy. I am okay. He is not scary." I went back to my own room, and I lay in the bed with Mara, and I did not sleep. I called Cole on Wednesday. I did not tell him what the man at the turnout had said. I did not have the words. I told him I was still working on it. I told him he should stay away from Mid-City. I told him to be careful at the house. He asked me what was happening, and I lied to him for the second time in my life. I told him nothing was happening. I told him I was trying to figure it out. He did not believe me. He told me to call him if I needed him. He told me he loved me. He said the word brother. I said brother back. That was the last time I spoke to Cole, on a phone where his voice was the voice he had always had. He showed up at my house on Friday night unannounced. I heard the truck before I saw it again, the same low bad muffler. The same way Cole rolled to a stop in front of a house, slow and considered, the way a man parks who has been backing trucks into welding bays for 15 years. The truck idled out front for a minute, then the engine cut off. Then the door. I was in the garage. I had not gone out on the porch that evening. I had not gone out on the porch any evening that week. I had been in the garage for an hour after Ellie went to bed, sitting at the workbench with the best dad mug and the Buffalo Trace, trying to write down every word the man at the turnout had said in the order he had said it. I had a yellow legal pad in front of me. The legal pad had a few sentences on it and a lot of empty space. The garage door was up. I heard Cole come around the side of the house, and through the back gate, and then I saw him in the doorway. He had a six-pack of Modelo in his hand. He had not shaved in a couple of days. He had not been sleeping. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had not been sleeping for about a week, which was how long I had not been sleeping, which was probably how long he had not been sleeping either. "Brother," he said. "Brother." He came in. He sat down on the stool. He set the six-pack on the workbench between us. He pulled two off the plastic and pried both caps off on the edge of the workbench. He handed me one. "You did not come over Sunday," he said. "Like we said, Sundays." "I am sorry. You did not call this whole week. I called you Wednesday. You called me for 2 minutes Wednesday, and you told me you were figuring it out, and you hung up. That is not calling." "I know. What is going on, Adam?" I drank my beer. I looked at the yellow legal pad on the workbench. I closed the legal pad and turned it over so the page was face down. I looked at my brother. He was looking at me with the look I could not lie to, the look he had had since he was 12. I had been promising myself I was not going to tell him. I had been promising myself for a week. I had been telling myself there was no version of this where telling Cole the truth made anything better. He was going to know soon enough. The deal was going to be paid one way or the other, and there was nothing he could do about it. There was no reason to put it in his head ahead of time. I had been lying to myself the whole week. I was going to tell him. I had known I was going to tell him from the moment Mara had put her hand on mine across the kitchen table on Sunday morning and made me promise we would find a way out. There was no way out I was going to find alone. There was no way out at all, probably. But I was not going to face this alone, and the person I had ever faced anything with was sitting across from me on the stool with a Modelo in his hand. "Cole," I said. "Yeah." I went back out to the turnout last Saturday night. He had been about to drink. He stopped with the bottle halfway to his mouth. "You did not tell me." "No. You said you were going to tell me before you went out there. We sat in this garage and we agreed. You said you would tell me." "I know. Why did you not tell me?" "Because I knew you would come with me, and I did not want you out there." He looked at me a long second. He drank his beer. "Talk," he said. So I told him. I told him about driving out at night. I told him about the silence in the swamp. I told him about the man stepping out of the trees. I told him about the conversation. I told him every word the man had said. I read him the words off the legal pad I had been writing them on, because I had written them down so I could remember them exactly. The equal decade in shape and value, the prime years, the work years, the decade ahead of your daughter. The math is the math. The terms are set. The collection has begun. I told him about Ellie's drawing. I told him about the man who waits standing in her doorway at night. I told him about Mara across the kitchen table, and the promise we had made each other that we would find a way out. I told him I did not know if there was a way out. I told him the price. The price is the next 10 years of Ellie's life. Cole did not say anything for a long time. He set the beer down on the workbench. He folded his hands together in his lap. He looked at the floor of the garage. I waited. When he looked up, his face was the kind of face I had not seen since the day he had called me from the oncologist's office. It was a face with all the small expressions wiped off it. It was the face of a man who had been told a thing and could not figure out what to do with the thing yet. "He told you that," he said. "He told me that. My niece. Yes. 8 years old. Yes. He is going to take her. Yes." He stood up. He walked to the open garage door. He walked outside into the driveway. He stood with his back to me, looking up at the sky. He stood that way a long time. I did not follow him. I did not say anything. I sat on the cinder block with my Modelo in my hand, and I watched my brother stand in my driveway with his hands at his sides, looking up at the sky, and I waited. He came back into the garage after maybe 5 minutes. He sat back down on the stool. He picked up his beer. He drank a long pull. "You are sure?" he said. He was very clear. "There is no possibility he meant something else. There is no possibility you misunderstood. There is no possibility he is lying to you. He has no reason to lie to me, Cole. He gets what he gets either way. He came to me to tell me the price, because he wanted me to understand the price before he started taking it. He is on a schedule. The decade he is owed is going to be the decade ahead of my daughter. She is going to die before she turns 18. She might die slow. She might die fast. He did not specify. Cole closed his eyes. He kept them closed for a long time. There is no way out, he said. I have offered him myself. I have offered him every year I have left. I have offered him everything I will ever be. And, he said, the math does not balance. He said the years I have are not equivalent. He said the only equivalent decade in the bloodline is hers. He said the math is the math. He said the terms are set. Bloodline. What? He said bloodline. He used the word bloodline. He meant the line going down from me. He meant your niece. The line that comes after. Yes, I am not in that line. I am beside you, not below you. I am the gift he gave. I looked at him. He looked at me. I do not know what I had been thinking about when I had walked through the math myself the week before. I had been thinking about whose decade was equivalent. I had been thinking about prime years and work years. I had not been thinking about whose family. I had been thinking about my family because the deal had been struck by me and the price was being collected from my family, and that had been as far as my thinking had gone. I had not been thinking about Cole as somebody he could take instead. I had not been thinking about Cole as the gift that could be given back. I had not let myself think about it. Cole, I said. Adam. No. Adam. No, Cole. You are going to listen to me. I am not. I stood up off the cinder block. You are not doing this, I said. Do not even think it. The deal was mine. I made it. I am the one who owes. He is going to take what he is going to take. You do not get to walk in there and offer yourself. That is not how this works. You do not know how this works. I am the only person who has ever talked to him. I know how it works. You have talked to him twice, and the second time he told you what was already decided. That is not enough to know how it works. He might take a substitute, he might not. We do not know. Cole, I am the one who got the 10 years. I know. I am the one who is alive because of what you did at the turnout. I am the one who got married and had a kid and built a life on a decade I should not have had. Not Ellie, not Mara, me. Cole, listen to me. No, brother, you listen to me. You listen to me for 1 minute. 10 years ago, you stood at a turnout in the dark and you made a deal with something you did not understand to save my life. You did that for me. You did that without asking me what I wanted. You did that without telling me what you had done. You carried it for 10 years and you never told me, because that is the kind of man you are, and that is the kind of brother you have always been. And I love you for it, Adam, and I will never not love you for it. But it was not your trade to make. It was my life. It was my body. It was my time. You took that decision for me because I was too sick to make it, and I am telling you right now, brother, I am telling you, you should have let me die. Cole, you should have let me die 10 years ago. I was 32. I had said goodbye in my head. I was ready. I had told Renee I loved her, and I had told Lacey I loved her, and I had told you I loved you. I was ready. And you went out to that turnout and you traded my niece for me, and you did not know it, and you would not have done it if you had known, but you did it. And I have been alive on her decade for 10 years without knowing it, and I am not letting that stand. He was crying. I had not seen Cole cry in 20 years. The tears were coming down his cheeks and his face was set, and he was not wiping them. I am not letting that stand, he said again. Cole, please. He has to take a substitute. If he is what you say he is, if he is reasonable, if he is bound by the terms, he has to. The terms were that an equivalent decade had to be returned from the bloodline. I will return more than a decade. I will return everything I am, right back to where I was supposed to be 10 years ago. He gets the whole gift back, plus interest. Plus interest, Adam. He should be happy to take it. You do not know what he will do. Then I will go find out. No. Yes. Cole, I am asking you. I am asking you, brother. Do not. Please. There has to be another way. Mara and I are going to figure this out. We are going to find a way. We are not going to lose her. We are not going to lose you either. I cannot lose either of you. Cole, please. Brother. He stood up off the stool. He set the beer down on the workbench, half full. He came over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders. He looked at me. His eyes were red. His face was wet. His hands were warm and heavy on my shoulders. I love you, Adam, he said. Cole, I love you. You are my brother. You will always be my brother. Tell Mara I love her. Tell Ellie I love her. Tell Renee. Cole, tell Mama too. He hugged me. He hugged me hard. He held me the way he had held me when our father had died, the way he had held me at my wedding when we had both been crying for different reasons. He smelled like Old Spice and welding flux, and the underlying clean smell that was coal, the smell I had known since I was the size of his thigh. He let me go. He walked out of the garage. I went after him. I caught him at the truck. Cole, do not do this, please. He turned around at the truck and looked at me. His face had set. The tears were still on his face, but the face had set behind them. Adam, he said, I wish you had never gone out there that night. I wish you had let me die. I have spent 10 years grateful for what you did, and I am still grateful, and I will be grateful when I am gone. But you should have let me die. I am going to fix it. He got in the truck, he started it, he backed it out of the driveway, he drove away. I stood in the driveway watching the taillights until they turned at the end of the block, and then I stood there a while longer, and then I went back into the garage. I sat on the cinder block. I looked at the half-empty Modelo on the workbench. I looked at the yellow legal pad with the man's words written on it. I did not call Cole. I did not get in the car and follow him. I do not know why. I have asked myself the question 1,000 times since. I have asked myself why I did not get in the car. I have asked myself why I did not chase him down. I have asked myself why I did not call Renee, why I did not call Mama, why I did not do any of the things a man does when his brother walks out of a garage and tells him he is going to fix it. I sat on the cinder block in my garage at 11:30 at night on a Friday, and I let my brother drive off, and I have lived with that for the rest of my life. I think the truth is that I knew. I think the truth is that some part of me had already done the math the moment Cole had said the word bloodline. I think some part of me had understood the second he had said it that this was the way out. I think some part of me had already accepted the trade. I think the part of me that loved my daughter and the part of me that loved my brother had stood at a doorway looking at each other across a kitchen table inside my chest, and the part that loved my brother had stepped back, and the part that loved my daughter had walked through, and I had let it happen. I think the truth is that I let him go because I wanted him to go. I sat in the garage for an hour. I drank the rest of the six-pack alone, Cole's half-empty beer included. I did not feel drunk. I did not feel anything. After a while, I went inside. I locked the back door. I went upstairs. I lay down in the bed next to Mara. Mara was awake. She had been awake for a while. He came over, she said. Yes. You told him? Yes. What did he say? I did not answer for a long time. I could not. Mara waited. He said he was going to fix it, I said. She did not say anything. She turned in the bed and put her face against my chest, and I held her in the dark, and neither of us cried. Neither of us slept. The next day was Saturday. Cole did not call. I did not call him. I did not tell Renee anything was wrong. Renee did not call me, which meant Cole had gone home and been Cole for the morning and the afternoon, and Renee had not noticed anything in his face that did not belong there. Cole was good at hiding things in his face. He had always been good at it. He had had to be in his line of work. Ellie had soccer practice at 10. I took her. I stood on the sidelines with the other dads, and I watched my daughter run up and down the field after a ball with 20 other 8-year-olds. I watched her score a goal. I watched her come running up to me after the practice was over with her cheeks flushed and her hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. I picked her up. I kissed her on the head. I told her she was the best soccer player I had ever seen. She laughed and told me I was lying. She told me Sophia was way better at soccer than her. She told me Sophia was going to be a professional soccer player someday and that she, Ellie, was going to be a veterinarian. I took her home. Mara made grilled cheese for lunch. The three of us sat at the kitchen table. Ellie talked about her soccer practice. Mara asked questions. I tried to laugh in the right places. That afternoon, Mara took Ellie to the pool at her sister's apartment complex in Metairie. They were going to be gone for about 4 hours. I sat on the front porch with a Modelo. I did not look at my phone. I did not call Cole. I sat on the porch, and I watched the live oak across the street, and I waited. He did not come. The man did not come. The street stayed empty. The streetlight came on at the corner. 747 came and went. The Howard kids across the street rode their bikes up and down the sidewalk, the way they did every Saturday evening, the way Ellie did on the weekdays. The man did not come. I sat on the porch until 10, and the man did not come, and the only conclusion I could draw was that the man did not need to come anymore. He was not standing across the street, because he was not where he needed to be. He was somewhere else. He was waiting somewhere else. I knew where, but I would not let myself put it into a sentence. Mara and Ellie came home around 8:30. Ellie was sunburned. Mara was tired. Ellie went up to take a bath. Mara sat on the porch with me for a minute. He is not there tonight, she said. No. She looked at me. She looked at my hand on the porch railing. She took my hand. She held it. Adam, she said. Yeah. Where is Cole tonight? I looked at her. She knew. She knew what I had not known I knew. She had figured it out somewhere between Mid-City and Metairie and the pool, and she had carried it through the afternoon, and she was looking at me with the question on her face, because she wanted me to be the one to say it. I do not know, I said. That was the truth. I did not know. I had not known for sure until she had asked. We sat on the porch, in the dark, with our hands held. After a while, she went inside to check on Ellie. After a while longer, I went inside. I locked the door. I went upstairs. I lay down in the bed. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, and I waited for the phone to ring. The phone went off at 8:12 in the morning. I had not been asleep. I had been lying in the bed, in the gray light from the window, with my eyes open, listening to Ellie singing to herself in her room down the hall. She had been awake for an hour. She had been up there with her dolls and her stuffed animals, making them put on a play. She does this every weekend morning. She does it from the moment she wakes up. The sound of my daughter making her stuffed animals talk to each other in the next room over has been the soundtrack of every Saturday and Sunday morning of my life since she was 4 years old. I had been listening to her sing, and I had been waiting for the phone, and when the phone went off on the bedside table, I knew before I looked at it who it was going to be. It was Renee. I got up, out of the bed. I picked up the phone. I went out into the hallway and down the stairs as I answered it, because I did not want Mara to hear, although Mara was already sitting up in the bed when I left the room, and her eyes were open, and she knew. Renee, I said. Adam. Oh God. Oh God. Adam. Slow down. What is going on? Cole did not come home last night. He told me he was going up to Slidell, to that guy's camp, Mike's camp. He was supposed to be back by 8 last night. I went to bed at 10. I just woke up, and he is not here, Adam. He is not here, and his side of the bed has not been slept in, and I have called him 8 times this morning, and the phone goes straight to voicemail. Adam. Adam. Oh, God. Take a breath, Renee. Take a breath. I called Mike. I called him. Cole never showed up. Mike said he was waiting for Cole until midnight, and Cole never came. He said he tried to call Cole, and Cole did not pick up. He said he just figured Cole had gotten busy and not been able to make it up. He did not call me to ask. He just went to bed. Okay. I called the police. I called 911. I called the regular line. They said they cannot do anything for 24 hours. They said, adult men sometimes go on benders and come back the next day embarrassed, and they cannot send anybody until 24 hours. I have been calling and calling Adam. Lacey is awake. She is sitting in the kitchen, and she is asking me where her dad is, and I do not have an answer for her. Okay, Renee. Where is he, Adam? Where is he? I sat down at the kitchen table. My hand was shaking. I put the phone on the table on speaker, and I held my own hand to make it stop shaking. The pancake batter from yesterday morning was still in the sink because I had not done the dishes. "Renee," I said. "Yeah?" "I am going to come find him. Adam, I am going to start driving. I will look on the route up to Slidell. I will look on the route back. I will look at the places he likes to go when he wants to be alone. I will call you the second I know anything. You think he is okay?" I had to pause for a second before I answered her. I think I closed my eyes. I do not remember. "I do not know, Renee. I am going to find him. Adam, I am going to find him. Get Lacey something to eat. Call Mama. Tell her what is going on. Tell her not to worry yet. Okay. I love you, Renee. I am going to find him." I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand. I sat there a long time. I think I was waiting for something. I think I was waiting for the world to change in a way that would make what was about to happen not be what was about to happen. The world did not change. The kitchen was the kitchen. The pancake batter was the pancake batter. The light coming in through the window was the gray morning light I had watched come up an hour earlier. Mara came down the stairs. She came into the kitchen in her bathrobe. She stopped in the doorway and looked at me. "Adam," she said. That was Renee. "He did not come home." "No." She came over to the table. She put her hand on the top of my head the way she used to put her hand on the top of Ellie's head when Ellie was a baby and was upset about something. She held her hand there. "You know where he is," she said. "I know where he is. Are you going?" "I am going." "Do you want me to come with you?" "No." "Adam." "No, Mara. I do not want you to see this. I do not want you to be in the car with me when I find him. I do not want Ellie alone in the house with all of this going on. I want you to stay here with our daughter. I want you to be with her until I get back." She did not say anything. Her hand was still on the top of my head. After a while, she moved it down to my cheek. I put my hand on top of her hand. I held it there for a moment. "Promise me you will come back," she said. "I will come back. Promise. I promise." I got up. I put on jeans and a shirt and shoes. I took the keys off the hook by the back door. I kissed Ellie on the top of the head, where she was sitting cross-legged on the floor of her bedroom in her pajamas surrounded by dolls. She held up a doll for me. She told me this one's name was Brandy. I told her, "Hello, Brandy." I told her I had to go help Uncle Cole with something and I would be back later. She nodded without looking up from her dolls. I went back downstairs. Mara was at the front door. She handed me a thermos of coffee she had made while I was upstairs. I had not seen her make it. She had made it fast and silent the way she had done 100 things in my life while I had not been looking. She kissed me. She held the kiss a long time. She put her forehead against mine. "Come back to me," she said. "I am coming back." I went out the back door. I got in the car. I backed down the driveway slow and quiet. I turned out of the alley. I drove. The drive out is the drive I have already told you about. The drive that took longer than it should have. The slow speed. The radio off. The trucks passing me, with their drivers staring. The sky, the color of an unwashed pan. The wind in the cypress. The moss moving slow and dead before the storm that was going to come that afternoon but had not come yet. The turn at the fishing camp turnout where there was no sign and never had been. The gravel popping under the tires. Cole's truck was already there. I sat in the car for a long time before I turned the engine off. I had been hoping, the whole drive, that I was wrong. I had been hoping I would pull into the turnout and find it empty. I had been hoping the truck would not be there. I had been hoping there was some other place Cole had gone, some place I had not thought of, some friend or some bar or some cousin in Mississippi where he had driven to think. The truck was there. The driver's door was open. The keys were in the ignition. The bell was dinging. I turned my engine off. The bell from Cole's truck was the only sound for a long second, and then the sound of the swamp came in around it, the cicadas in the cypress, and a frog somewhere in the water, and a bird I could not name calling from a tree off to the right of the turnout. I got out of the car. I closed my door quietly. I do not know why I closed it quietly. There was nobody to wake. I walked across the gravel. The gravel popped under my shoes the way it had popped under the tires. The popping sounded too loud. The popping sounded like the loudest sound in the world. Cole's truck was at an angle, the way a man parks when he is not paying attention to how he is parking, when he has driven somewhere with one thing on his mind and the parking has been the last thing he was thinking about. The driver's side door was open at about a 40-degree angle. The dome light inside the cab was on. The dome light was orange, because Cole's interior lights had been orange since I had known him. He was on the gravel. He was slumped against the rear tire of the truck. His back was against the tire. His head was tilted back against the truck bed. His eyes were open. His eyes were looking up at the sky. His arms were at his sides on the gravel. His legs were stretched out in front of him. He was wearing the jeans he had been wearing in my garage on Friday night. He was wearing the same flannel shirt. He had the same boots on. His hair was the same. His beard was the same. His skin was gray. I do not mean it was pale. I mean it was gray. It was the gray of dishwater. It was the gray of an oyster shell. It was the gray of Cole's face in the photograph from New Year's Eve, the year he had been sick, the photograph where he had been holding Lacey on his lap with the sparkler in her hand. He looked the way he had looked the month before he had almost died. I knelt down next to him on the gravel. I put my hand on his shoulder. His shoulder was cold, the kind of cold that did not belong to a man who had been alive an hour ago, the kind of cold that did not belong to a man who had been alive at all. I sat down next to him. I sat with my back against the truck. I sat the way he was sitting. I took his hand. His hand was cold and stiff, and the fingers did not move the way fingers move when they are alive. I looked at him. I looked at his face. I looked at the eyes that were not looking back at me anymore. I looked at the gray that had come into his skin. I do not remember crying. I think I cried. I think I sat in the gravel with my dead brother's hand in mine, and I cried the way I had not cried since our father died. I think I cried for a long time. I do not remember it as crying. I remember it as a long silence with my body doing things I was not asking it to do. When I lifted my head, the Reaper was standing in front of me. He was not the lean man in the dark coat. He had been the lean man at the turnout the week before, and he had been the lean man across the street from my house, and he had been the lean man at the end of my driveway. He was not the lean man now. The lean man had been for the negotiation. The lean man had been the form he wore when he was making the deal and explaining the terms and telling me the price. The lean man had been a thing he had chosen so I could talk to him. The lean man had been a courtesy. The form in front of me now was the form he wore when the contract was closed. He was tall. He was taller than the lean man. He was taller than a man should be. He was robed in black from the top of his head to the ground. The robe did not move in the wind that was up in the cypress. The robe did not have a sheen on it the way black fabric has a sheen when the light hits it. The robe was the black of a place where light did not go. The black drank the light of the morning and gave it nothing back. The hood was up. The hood was deep enough that I could not see anything inside it. There was no face. There was no hint of a face. There was a darkness inside the hood that was the same black as the robe, and the darkness was the same depth as the robe, and the darkness extended back into the hood without an end, the way the inside of a pipe extends back when you look down it. His right hand was on the handle of a scythe. The scythe was long. The handle came up to the level of where his head would have been if his head had been visible. The blade at the top of the scythe was curved, the way the blade of a scythe is curved, but the blade was darker than the iron of a normal blade, and it was longer than the blade of a normal blade, and the edge of the blade was sharper than any edge I had ever seen. The light of the morning caught on the edge of the blade and stayed there in a thin, bright line. He was standing about 6 feet from where I was sitting. He had not been there when I had lifted my head. He had appeared in the way the lean man had appeared at the turnout last week, which was not appearing at all. He had simply been there. I sat with Cole's hand in mine, and I looked up at him. He looked down at me. If a thing without a face can look down. The deal is done, he said. His voice was the lean man's voice. The voice from 10 years ago. The voice from the porch and the driveway and the swamp at night. The voice I had heard in my dreams every night that week. The voice was the same voice, even though the form was different. And that was the worst part of it, because the voice had been a man's voice when he had been the lean man. And now it was coming out of the dark, inside the hood, without a body to make it. You may have the body, he said. I did not answer him. I do not know if I could have. My throat had closed up at the sound of him. The closeness of him made the air around me feel like the air at the back of a freezer. The smell that Cole had described in the garage the week before was the smell I smelled now. The smell of cold, the smell of a place where things keep. He stood for one more moment. Then he was gone. I do not know how to say what gone looked like. He did not turn. He did not walk back into the trees. He did not fade. He did not vanish. He thinned. The black of the robe and the dark inside the hood went lighter at the edges, the way smoke goes lighter at the edges as it rises, and the lightness moved inward, and the figure became less and less, and after a few seconds there was nothing where he had been standing except the gravel. The scythe was gone with him. The smell of cold was gone with him. The sound of the swamp came back. The cicadas, the frogs, the bird calling from the tree off to the right. The whole swamp had been silent for the moment he had been standing there. I had not noticed the silence while it was happening, because I had been looking at him. I noticed it now in its absence. I sat with Cole on the gravel for I do not know how long. The sun came up further over the trees. The morning got brighter. The wind in the cypress kept moving the Spanish moss, slow and dead before the storm that was coming that afternoon. I do not remember most of what I did in the next hour. I remember at some point I let go of his hand. I remember at some point I stood up. I remember at some point I walked around to the front of the truck and reached in through the open door and turned the key in the ignition the rest of the way to off so the bell would stop dinging. I remember the bell stopping. I remember the silence after. I remember at some point I picked Cole up. He weighed about 200 pounds. I weigh about 220. I had not carried a grown man before. I did not know if I could do it. I did it. I got my arms under him and I lifted him off the gravel and I carried him around to the passenger side of my car. I opened the passenger door. I put him in the seat. I buckled the seatbelt across his chest. I do not know why I buckled the seatbelt. He was past needing a seatbelt. But I buckled it. It seemed important. It seemed like the kind of thing you do for a person you love when you are taking them somewhere they do not need to go. I closed his door. I walked around to the driver's side. I got in. I sat with my hands on the wheel for a minute. I picked up my phone. I called Mara. She picked up on the first ring. I found him, I said. She did not say anything. I could hear her breathing on the line. Mara, yeah, he is gone. She made a sound. It was not a word. It was a small, low sound that came out of her throat. I am driving him home, I said. Adam, I am bringing him home. Call Renee. Tell her to come over with Lacey. Tell her not to come alone. Have her ask Mike to drive her. Tell her I am bringing Cole back. Okay? Mara, yeah? Tell her on the phone before she gets in the car. Do not let her find out when she gets here. Tell her I found him at Manchac and he is gone. Adam, tell her, okay? I love you. I love you. Come home. I hung up. I started the car. I drove out of the turnout. The gravel popped under the tires. The bell from Cole's truck was silent now because I had turned off the key. I went out of the trees and back onto the highway, and I drove south, back the way I had come, with my brother in the passenger seat next to me. The drive back was longer than the drive there. The wind had picked up and the cypress on both sides was moving. The Spanish moss was moving. The first drops of rain had started by the time I got to La Place. By the time I crossed the Bonacary spillway, the rain was steady, a Louisiana September rain that was warm and heavy and was going to last all afternoon. I drove with the radio off. I drove with my brother in the seat next to me. He had sat in that seat 10 years ago, the afternoon I had picked him up at the welding yard after the call from the oncologist. He had sat in that seat at our father's funeral, when I had driven him back to the apartment he had at the time. He had sat in that seat at my wedding, in his tuxedo, on the way from the hotel to the venue, complaining about the bow tie. He had sat in that seat for most of the important moments of my adult life, because he was my brother and because we did not drive separately when we did not have to. He was sitting in it now. He was not complaining about anything. The rain was loud on the roof of the car. I did not turn on the wipers for a long time. I drove with the rain coming down on the windshield and the road blurring out in front of me, and after a while I noticed the road blurring out and I turned the wipers on, and the wipers cleared the windshield. And I kept driving. I came into Mid-City around 11. The streets were empty because of the rain. I turned onto our block. I pulled into the driveway. I parked. Mara was on the porch. Renee was on the porch. Lacey was on the porch. Ellie was on the porch. The four of them were standing under the cover of the porch, out of the rain. Mara was holding Lacey by the shoulders. Lacey was crying. Renee was on her knees on the porch boards. Ellie was standing apart from them with her hands at her sides, looking at the car. The neighbors across the street had come out onto their porch too. The Howards, the Boudreaux family further down. A woman I had never met was standing in her doorway under an umbrella. I sat in the car a moment with my hand on the door handle. Then I got out. I walked around to the passenger side. I opened the door. I unbuckled my brother. I lifted him out of the seat. I carried him through the rain across the lawn to the porch. Renee made a sound I will hear in my head until I die. It was not a sound a human voice should be able to make. It was a sound that came from somewhere her voice had not been to before. She got up off her knees, and she came down off the porch into the rain, and she took her husband's face in her hands, and she said his name, and she said it again, and she said it again, and Cole did not answer. I laid him on the porch steps, 'cause I could not get him up onto the porch with everybody on it. I laid him with his head on the top step. Renee sat down on the lawn in the rain next to the steps, and she held his hand. Lacey came down off the porch and sat on the bottom step. Lacey put her hand on her father's leg. Mara held Ellie. Mara held my daughter against her chest, with her hand over my daughter's eyes. Ellie was not crying. Ellie was looking out from between Mara's fingers at the man on the porch steps. Ellie was looking at her uncle. Ellie was looking at her uncle the way a child looks at a thing she has already understood in a way the adults around her have not yet figured out. Someone called 911. I do not remember who. I do not remember when. I remember at some point an ambulance was in the street. I remember at some point a police car was in the street. I remember the rain still coming down. I remember Lacey not letting go of her father's leg until a paramedic asked her to step back, and even then she did not let go for another long moment. I remember Mara at some point putting Ellie down in the kitchen and coming back out into the rain and putting her arms around me. I remember holding my wife on the lawn in the rain with my brother on the porch behind us. I remember thinking about how I had promised her I would come back, and how I had come back, and how Cole had come back too, but only one of us had come back the way we had left. I remember thinking that the math had balanced. The hospital was Tulane Medical Center because that was where the ambulance took him. They took Cole's body into the back, and they put it in a room, and they made the rest of us sit in a small waiting area with bad fluorescent lighting and a vending machine that made a hum I could hear with my teeth. Renee was inconsolable for the first hour. She kept saying his name. She kept saying he had been fine that morning. She kept saying he had eaten breakfast and kissed her, and told her he was going up to Slidell and would be back by 8. She kept saying he had been fine. The hospital chaplain came and sat with her and held her hand. Renee did not look at the chaplain. Lacey did not cry past the first half hour. She sat next to her mother and stared at the wall in front of her and did not move. Lacey was 14. Lacey was old enough to understand that her father was dead and old enough not to have any tools for it. She just sat. After a while I went over and sat down on her other side and put my arm around her shoulders, and she leaned against me, and that was how we stayed for the next hour. Mara was in the chair across from us with Ellie in her lap. Ellie had a small pink jacket on that Mara had grabbed off the hook before we had left the house. Ellie had her head against Mara's shoulder. Ellie was watching me across the room. Ellie was watching me the way she had watched me on the porch when I had carried Cole up onto the steps. She had not said anything for a long time. A doctor came out after maybe 2 hours. He was a young doctor. He had the look young doctors have in the ER on a Sunday when they are tired and have not slept. He came over to Renee and he knelt down next to her chair and he said the words. He said massive subarachnoid hemorrhage. He said they would do a full autopsy because he was 42 years old and they had to. He said it was sudden. He said it would have been almost instantaneous. He said he had not suffered. He said all the things ER doctors say, and Renee nodded at the right places, and she was not really listening. I was listening. The doctor said the words, and I sat with them. A brain hemorrhage, a burst vessel in the head, a thing that happens to a few thousand men in their 40s every year for no reason anybody can explain. A thing that does not look like anything else, a thing that does not show on a body, a thing that does not leave a mark. The math was the math. The Reaper did not work in marks. He worked in cause of death. He had taken Cole the way Cole was supposed to be taken if he had died 10 years ago like he was supposed to. He had taken him with a thing the doctors could explain. He had taken him with paperwork. I sat there in the waiting room with my niece against my shoulder, and I thought about how he had told me his name was the agreement made flesh, and how the agreement was bureaucratic, and how the bureaucracy was what made it terrible. The horror of the man at the turnout had never been a horror of monsters. It had been a horror of contracts. It had been a horror of paperwork that had been filed 10 years ago and was being closed today. A cop came over to me later. He was an older cop. He had a clipboard. He asked me a few questions. He asked when I had last seen my brother. He asked what my brother had been doing that morning. He asked when I had gotten the call from Renee. He asked where I had found him. I told him about the turnout at Manchac. I said my brother had liked to go up there to fish. I said we had gone up there together all our lives. I said I had thought of it because it was the kind of place my brother went when he needed to think. I had had a hunch. I had driven up. He had been there. The cop wrote it down. He asked me, did anybody else go up to Manchac that morning? I said, not that I knew. He asked me, did Cole tell you he was going there? I said, no. He asked me how I had known. I said, I just knew. He looked at me a long second. Then he wrote that down too. He asked me, had Cole been depressed? He asked me, had Cole talked about hurting himself? He asked me, had there been any trouble in the marriage? He asked me about money. He asked me about drugs. He asked me about gambling. He asked me the questions a cop has to ask when a man in his early 40s is found dead alone at a swamp turnout, and I answered the questions the way I had to answer them to keep the cop from looking too hard at any of it. There had been no depression, no talk of hurting himself, no trouble in the marriage, no money, no drugs, no gambling. Cole had been Cole. The cop wrote it down. He thanked me. He said the autopsy would tell them more. He said he was sorry for our loss. The autopsy report came back 10 days later. Massive subarachnoid hemorrhage from a ruptured berry aneurysm in the circle of Willis. The kind of aneurysm Cole would have been born with and lived with all his life without knowing about it, because most people who have them never know about them because most of them never burst. The ones that do burst kill people fast. Cole had probably felt a headache for 30 seconds. Then he had been gone. No drugs in his system. No alcohol. Trace caffeine, nothing else. No injuries, no bruising. No defensive marks, no anything. The report was filed. The case was closed. The coroner signed off. The funeral home took the body. Renee picked out the casket. Mama paid for half of it because Cole had not had life insurance and Renee was trying not to think about money yet. The funeral was at Our Lady of Lourdes in Chalmette on the second Saturday after he died. The church was full. Cole had not been a man who knew a lot of people the way some men know a lot of people, but the men he knew had all come because Cole was the kind of man whose absence you felt at the funeral when you had not understood his presence in the room when he had been alive. Welders from his yard in Belchas. 3 guys he had grown up with in Chalmette. Our mother's whole circle from St. Bernard. The men who fished with him at the bridge. Renee's brothers, 4 of them, all over 6 feet, all standing along the back of the church like a wall. I carried the casket with 3 of the welders and Renee's oldest brother. The casket was light. I had thought it was going to be heavy, and I had been preparing myself for it being heavy. It was light. I do not know why I remember that. It was light, and the wood was warm under my hands, and the air in the church smelled like incense and lilies in the cold of the air conditioning. Father Marcel did the eulogy. Renee did the eulogy after him. Renee had written hers out on a folded piece of paper, and she read it without looking up, and she did not cry. She had cried herself out the first week. She read about how Cole had asked her to marry him on a Tuesday afternoon at her kitchen table over leftover red beans and rice, because he had not been able to wait until the dinner he had planned for that weekend. She read about how Cole had held Lacey the first night they had brought Lacey home and had stayed up the whole night just looking at her, because he had said he could not believe he was a father. She read about how Cole had told her once that he had been given more time than he was supposed to have, and that every day of it had been a bonus, and that he was going to spend every day being grateful for the bonus. I do not know if Renee understood what Cole had meant when he had told her that. I do not know if she put it together. I do not know if she ever will. I did not give a eulogy. Mama had asked me to. I had said I could not. I had said the words I would say at my brother's funeral were not words I could say in a church. Mama had not pushed. I sat in the front pew with Mara on my left and Ellie on her other side. Ellie was wearing a small black dress Mara had bought for her at Dillard's 2 days earlier. Ellie did not understand most of what was happening. Ellie was 8. Ellie had lost her uncle, and she knew that, and she was sad, but she was 8, and the kind of grief a child has at 8 is a grief that lives in the body for a few weeks and then moves on, because the body of a child is not built to hold the weight that an adult body holds. I was glad of that. I sat in the front pew, and I looked at the casket in front of the altar, and I thought about my brother. I thought about him standing in my driveway with his hands at his sides looking up at the sky. I thought about him in the garage with the Modelo half drunk on the workbench. I thought about him at the turnout, alone, the night before he had died, deciding what he was going to do. I thought about him walking up to whatever spot of the turnout he had walked up to. I thought about him standing where I had stood the week before. I thought about him saying whatever he had said to make the Reaper come. I do not know what he said. I have spent the rest of my life wondering what he said. I think he said, "Take me." I think he said, "I am here." I think he said, "I am the one you saved, and I am giving it back, and I want her to live." I think he made an offer. I think he made the offer in plain language, because Cole had always been a man of plain language. I think the Reaper had considered the offer. I think the Reaper had accepted. I do not know what it had felt like for Cole. I do not know if it had hurt. The doctor at Tulane had said it would have been almost instantaneous. I have held on to that. I have held on to the words almost instantaneous the way a man holds on to a railing on a flight of stairs that is too steep. Father Marcel sprinkled the casket with holy water. The pallbearers carried the casket out of the church. Renee walked behind it. Lacey walked behind Renee. Mama walked behind Lacey. I walked behind Mama with Mara on one side and Ellie on the other. We buried him at St. Bernard Memorial Park, in the section where our father was buried. The grave was a few rows over from our father's. The cemetery was on a low rise of land, with live oaks scattered through it, and the sun coming down through the moss the way it always does, and the rain from the morning had quit, and the air was the heavy, still air that comes after a rain in September in Louisiana. I stood with my arm around Mara, and Mara had her arm around Ellie, and we watched my brother go into the ground. Father Marcel said the last words. The grave was filled. Renee laid a single yellow rose on the fresh earth. Lacey laid a small wooden cross she had made in her wood shop class at her school the year before. Mama could not bring herself to lay anything. Mama stood at the foot of the grave and held my hand. She did not cry. Mama did not cry in public. Mama had not cried in public since our father. I did not lay anything either. What I had to give my brother could not be laid on the grave. We had everyone back at our house in Mid-City after. Mara had bought food. Mama had brought a pot of red beans and a pot of rice. Renee's sister had brought a pan of bread pudding. The kitchen was full of people standing with paper plates in their hands, eating, talking quietly, the way people talk quietly after a funeral. Lacey sat in the living room on the couch, with Ellie next to her, both of them in their black dresses, both of them with their feet not quite touching the floor. I went out on the porch. I went out alone. I did not want a beer. I did not want a Modelo. I did not want anything. I sat on the porch steps, and I looked at the live oak across the street. The space under the oak was empty. The man was not there. The man had not been there since the night before Cole had died. The man would not be there again. The man's work was done. I sat on the steps a long time. After a while, Mara came out. She sat down next to me on the steps. She put her hand in mine. She did not say anything for a while. He is gone, she said finally. Cole, yes, and him too. The man, the one who waited, he is gone too. Yes, he is not coming back. No, you did not tell anybody. No, you will not. No. She nodded. She held my hand. She put her head on my shoulder. She had been my wife for almost 10 years. She knew the shape of the thing without me having to spell it. She knew what Cole had done, and she knew why I had not told anybody, and she knew I was never going to tell anybody. She knew because she was the only person who knew the rest of it. She knew because I had told her at the kitchen table on the Sunday morning after the second drive to the turnout. The two of us were the only people in the world who knew what had happened. It was going to stay the two of us. We sat on the porch in the warm afternoon and we held hands. And inside the house, Renee was eating a paper plate of bread pudding and trying to be a widow at 41. And Lacey was sitting on the couch next to Ellie trying to be a fatherless daughter at 14. And my mother was standing in the kitchen with her sister trying to be a mother who had lost a son. And none of them knew. None of them were ever going to know. They were going to believe what the autopsy said. They were going to believe Cole had been born with a small flaw in a vessel in his head, and that the flaw had finally burst on a Sunday morning at a fishing camp turnout he had driven to for reasons nobody could quite explain, and that he had been gone before he had hit the ground, and that there was nothing anybody could have done. That was the story. That was the kind story. The kind story was the one we were going to tell, and the kind story was the one they were going to carry. And the kind story was the one that was going to be on the headstone in St. Bernard Memorial Park in 20 years and 50 years, when none of us were left who had been at the funeral. The real story was going to stay with me and Mara. I had promised her on the kitchen table that we would not lose our daughter. I had promised her, and I had broken the promise in the spirit of it, because I had not been the one to find the way out. Cole had been the one to find the way out. Cole had taken the cost on himself because the cost was his to take, and I had been too much of a coward to take it for him, and that was what I was going to live with. I sat on the porch, and I held my wife's hand. The afternoon went on around us. The weeks after the funeral were the way weeks after a funeral are. There is no good shape for them. There is no language for them either. People who have not been through them imagine a continuous quiet wait. People who have been through them know it is not quiet. It is loud in places that should be quiet, and quiet in places that should be loud. The kitchen at 6 in the morning when you used to call your brother is loud. The funeral home calling about the last paperwork is quiet. There is no order to it. The grief comes and goes the way Louisiana weather comes and goes, with no warning, with no logic, with no respect for what you were doing when it arrived. Renee moved out of the brick ranch in Chalmette 3 weeks after the funeral. She did not sell it. She kept paying the mortgage on it for a while because she did not have it in her yet to make the decision to let it go. She and Lacey moved temporarily down to Houma to live with Renee's mother and stepfather. Lacey transferred to a high school down there because Renee did not want her in a Chalmette school where the teachers were going to look at her with the soft eyes teachers look at a fatherless kid with. Lacey did not want it either. I drove down a few weekends in a row to help Renee with the house. We packed up Cole's clothes. We went through his garage. We boxed up his welding gear. The yard in Belchesse had told her to keep all of it if she wanted to, or to bring it back if she did not. Renee did not know what she wanted to do with it. She did not know if she wanted Lacey to have it someday. She did not know if she wanted to give it to me. She did not know if she wanted to sell it. She left it in boxes in the garage of her mother's place in Houma. I helped her with the boxes. I helped her with the U-Haul. I helped her clean out the refrigerator. I helped her find Cole's life insurance paperwork, which she had bought through the yard, which was a small policy but a real one. Enough that she would not have to worry about money for a year while she figured out the rest of her life. I helped her in the small ways a brother-in-law helps when the brother is gone and the wife is left. I could not help her with the rest of it. I could not give her back what she had lost. I could not tell her the only thing I could have told her that would have made any sense of it, which was that her husband had loved her so much, and had loved his niece so much, and had decided that those loves were worth the trade he had made on a Saturday night in a gravel turnout off Highway 51. I could not give her that. The kind story was what she had, and I let her have the kind story. Mama took it hard the way mothers take it hard when they lose their oldest son. She did not call me as much as she used to. She did not come over as much as she used to. She started going to Mass every morning at her parish in Gentilly, which she had not done since our father had died. She lit candles for Cole on Tuesday afternoons, because Cole had been born on a Tuesday. She talked about him in the present tense for a while. She corrected herself when she did it. After a few months, she stopped correcting herself. I went back to work. I emailed Gavin and told him I had needed the time. He told me he was sorry for my loss. He told me everyone on the team was sorry. He told me to take more time if I needed it. I did not take more time. The work was the work, and the work was a thing I could do with my hands and my eyes that did not require me to think about my brother. I went to stand up at 9, and I argued with Gavin about buttons, and I shipped tickets, and I did the things I had been doing for 8 years, because there was no other version of it that worked. Mara and I did not talk about it much in the first months. There was nothing to say that the two of us did not already know. We knew the shape of what had happened. We knew the cost. We knew who had paid it, and we knew who had been spared, and we knew the math that had let the spare happen. There was no language between us for any of it that we did not already speak with a look. What we did instead was the small ordinary things. We made dinner. We watched movies with Ellie. We took Ellie to the zoo and to the aquarium and to the playground at City Park. We took her to soccer practice on Saturdays. We took her to her cousin's birthday party in Metairie. We went to Renee's mother's house in Houma for Thanksgiving, and we sat at a long table with Renee and Lacey and a dozen people I had never met, and we ate, and we passed dishes, and we held hands during grace, and Cole was not at the table, and nobody said his name, because nobody at that table had it in them yet to say his name in front of Lacey. We came home from Houma late on Thanksgiving night, with Ellie asleep in the back seat. Mara drove the second half. I sat in the passenger seat. I sat in the seat my brother had sat in on the drive back from Manchac. I had not been able to sit in it for the first month after he died. I had ridden in the back seat when we had gone places together as a family, and Mara had let me, because she had known why. That night, on the drive back from Houma, I sat in the passenger seat. The road was dark. The dash light was a low blue. Mara had her hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. The radio was on low, some country station Mara liked. I looked over at her after a while, and she felt me looking, and she looked back, and she smiled, a small, tired, honest smile, and she reached her right hand off the wheel and put it on top of mine on the center console, and we drove the rest of the way home like that. The man across the street did not come back. The man at the end of the driveway did not come back. The man in Ellie's doorway did not come back. Ellie put the construction paper drawing in a folder in her closet. She did not draw the man again. I asked her one night, about a month after the funeral, when I was tucking her in, whether she had seen the man who waits lately. She thought about it for a moment. She told me she had not. She told me he had probably gone home. I asked her what she thought home was for him. She told me she did not know, but she thought it was probably a place where he had to wait for somebody else, because he had been done waiting for us. She said it the way an 8-year-old says a thing, which is the way a person says a thing when she has not yet learned that some things are too big to say plainly. I told her she was probably right. I kissed her on the forehead. I turned out the light. I stood in the doorway of her room a long moment looking at her. She was 8. She was going to be 9 in February. The decade ahead of her was hers. 8 to 18. Childhood to adulthood. The years that make a person. She was going to have them. I went downstairs. Mara was at the kitchen table grating. I sat down across from her with a glass of water. I watched her for a long time. After a while, she looked up at me. "What?" she said. "I love you. I love you too. That is all." She smiled. She went back to her grating. I sat at the table with my water and watched her until she finished the essay she was working on, and then I went to bed. Christmas was hard. Mama hosted at her house in Gentilly the way she always had, and she put out a place setting for Cole because she could not bring herself not to, and the empty plate sat on the table the whole meal, and nobody mentioned it, and nobody moved it. Renee and Lacey drove up from Homa. Lacey gave Ellie a small wooden cross she had made in her shop class, and Ellie hung it on the wall over her bed, and it has been there ever since. We sang the carols Mama had always made us sing. We ate the gumbo Mama had been making at Christmas. Since I was old enough to eat solid food, I helped Mama with the dishes. Mama did not cry until we were alone at the sink, and then she cried for about a minute, and then she stopped, and we finished the dishes in silence. Spring came. Spring always comes. The azaleas in our front yard bloomed in March the way they always did. Ellie turned 9 in February. I took her to City Park for her birthday with 3 of her friends from school, and we rode the carousel, and we ate beignets at Café du Monde, and we watched her blow out the candles on a cake Mara had made at home. Cole was not at her birthday party. He had been at every birthday party of hers since she had been born. He had taken pictures at the last one. The pictures were in an album in my office. The first anniversary of Cole's death fell on a Sunday in September again. The calendar had moved a day, the way calendars do. The day was warm and gray, and the kind of close in Louisiana September day that feels like a wet hand on the back of your neck. Renee drove up from Homa with Lacey. We met at the cemetery in St. Bernard at 11 in the morning. We stood at the grave. We did not say much. Renee laid a yellow rose. Lacey laid a small carved piece of wood she had made in her shop class at her new school. Mama had brought a small bouquet of flowers from her garden. Mara had brought a Modelo. She set it down on the headstone next to the flowers. Renee laughed when she saw it. Renee laughed for the first time in a year and a half. A short, small laugh, and she said something low under her breath I could not hear, and she shook her head, and she smiled at Mara, and Mara smiled back. I did not lay anything. I stood at the foot of the grave, with my hands in my pockets. I looked at my brother's name carved in the stone, and I said the words I had been carrying for a year, inside my head, where only he could hear them, if he could hear them anywhere. We went to lunch after at a place in Chalmette that Cole had liked. We sat at a long table, Renee and Lacey and Mama and Mara and Ellie and me. We ordered too much food. We ate. We told a few stories about Cole, the kind of stories you tell at a family lunch when enough time has passed, the small funny stories, the ones that do not hurt. Lacey laughed at the story about Cole on his bachelor party throwing up at the turnout. She had heard the story before. She laughed anyway. She was 15 now. She was taller than her mother. She was going to be tall like her father. We came home in the afternoon. Renee and Lacey stayed for a couple of hours, and then they drove back to Homa. Mama went home. Mara went into the kitchen to start dinner. I went out on the porch. I had a Modelo. I sat down on the top step. The light was the September light. The street light at the corner was not on yet. The neighbors across the street had their porch light on and a low light through the window from the kitchen. Their dog was on their porch with them, the way it always was at that time of day. Ellie was on her bike on the sidewalk. She was 9 now. She had gotten a new bike for her birthday in February because she had outgrown the old one. The new bike was bigger, and she was bigger, and she rode the new bike the way she had ridden the old one, with the same hard, fast confidence, with her hair coming out from under the helmet Mara made her wear, with the same look of concentration on her face. She rode from one end of the sidewalk to the other and back. She waved at me on each lap. I waved back. I looked across the street at the live oak. The space under the oak was empty. The sidewalk was empty. The street light at the corner came on, slow and orange. The space stayed empty. It had been empty for a year. It was going to be empty for the rest of my life. I sat on the porch and I watched my daughter ride her bike up and down the sidewalk in the September dusk. I watched her go down to the corner and turn around and come back. I watched her stand up on the pedals to get up the small rise where the sidewalk lifted over a tree root. I watched her come back to the porch and skid to a stop and grin at me and ask me how long until dinner. I told her about 15 minutes. She rode off again. She was going to turn 10. She was going to turn 11. She was going to be 12 and 13 and 14 and 15. She was going to be 16, and she was going to want a car, and she was going to fight with us about a car. She was going to be 17, and she was going to take her senior picture in a dress Mara would help her pick out. She was going to be 18, and she was going to leave for college, and Mara was going to cry in the car on the drive home from dropping her off. She was going to be 20 and 25 and 30. She was going to be 40 and have her own children. She was going to be 50 and her hair was going to start to go gray the way Mara's was already starting to go gray. She was going to outlive me. She was going to outlive Mara. She was going to have the years. She was going to have all of them. I drank from the Modelo. I sat on the porch step. The wind was up a little in the live oak across the street. The Spanish moss and the branches moved slow and easy, the way it moves on an evening that is not the evening before a storm. The smell of the jambalaya Mara was making came out through the kitchen window. The dog on the porch across the street made a small, contented noise and lay down. I thought about my brother. I thought about him standing in the gravel turnout the Saturday night a year ago, alone, with his hands at his sides, with the swamp going quiet around him the way I knew it had gone quiet, with the lean man stepping out of the trees the way I knew he had stepped out, with Cole opening his mouth and saying whatever it was he had said. I thought about my brother choosing it. I thought about my brother choosing it because I had not been able to. I thought about my brother walking up to the math and balancing it himself, and I thought about how the math had balanced, and I thought about how my daughter was going to have her decade, and the decade after that, and all the decades after, because my brother had given her his. I was never going to tell anybody what he had done. I was never going to tell my mother. I was never going to tell Renee. I was never going to tell Lacey when she got old enough to understand. I was never going to tell my daughter when she got old enough to ask why I sometimes looked at her too long on a Sunday afternoon, why I sometimes held her shoulder a beat longer than I needed to when I said goodbye in the driveway. I was never going to tell anybody. The truth was mine. The truth was Mara's. The truth was Cole's. And he was gone, so the truth was mine and Mara's. It was going to stay with us until we were gone too, and then it was going to stay with neither of us because there was nobody to give it to that I would not be giving a curse to with it, and a curse was not what I had been given to carry forward. Ellie came back down the sidewalk. She skidded to a stop in front of the porch. She got off the bike. She dropped it on the lawn the way she had been dropping it on the lawn since she was 4. She came up the steps. She stopped on the step below me and put her hand on my knee. Daddy. Yeah, sweet pea. What were you thinking about? I looked at her. She had Cole's eyes. She had always had them. She had had them since the day she was born, and I had stood next to Mara's hospital bed and looked into the bassinet and seen them and known. They were the same green as our father's eyes had been, and as Cole's had been, and as mine were, which was a green that ran in the Boudreaux men. Ellie was a Boudreaux. She had the eyes. I was thinking about your uncle, I said. She nodded. She thought about it. I miss him, she said. I miss him too, sweet pea. Mama says he is in heaven. Yeah. Is he? I thought about it. I think so, I said. Good. She climbed up the rest of the steps and sat down next to me on the top step. She leaned her head against my arm. I put my arm around her. She had gotten taller in the last year. She came up to my shoulder when she stood next to me now, and she would not be coming up to my shoulder for much longer because she was going to keep growing, and that was the way it was supposed to be. And that was the deal that mattered now. The deal that was simple. The deal that was made every day by every parent in the world, with the universe at large, without anybody having to drive out to a swamp to make it. We sat on the porch step together. The streetlight at the corner stayed on, orange and slow. The space under the live oak across the street stayed empty. The wind moved the Spanish moss. The dog across the street snored on the porch boards. Mara called from the kitchen. She said dinner was ready. She said, come on in. Ellie got up. She ran inside. I sat for one more moment with the bottle in my hand and looked at the empty space under the live oak. I sat until I was sure. I had been sure for a year, but I sat until I was sure again. The space stayed empty. The space was going to stay empty. I got up. I picked up Ellie's bike from the lawn. I leaned it against the porch railing, the way I leaned it every night. I went inside. I closed the door behind me.